Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Budget Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. And first off, you don't have any. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, need a mover and seconder to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Howe. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the March 21st, 2023 Budget Committee of the Whole agenda be approved. All in favor? That's carried. All right, now we move to report FIN 2312. Beth, good evening.
Good evening. Katie, can you throw up the slides for us? So I'm going to turn it over to our CAO, Sarah Kim, to give some opening remarks and to speak to our strategic priorities.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to first take the opportunity to say that our finance team, our wonderful team, and CLT really endeavored to bring a fiscally responsible budget that aligns with our council's strategic priorities and one that really incorporates future sustainability. So we're quite excited to present tonight. The strategic priority, along with the budget, is really the most valuable tool for council as you move forward the corporation, and by embracing the community needs and also to use it as a foundation in your decision-making process for the remainder of this term. It's really critical and as it can really define the successful outcomes and producing tangible results. So it also sets the guidelines for council and staff to work together and deliver the highest level of service. So to start to present our 2023-2026 strategic priority setting process, I want to say that council did begin the strategic priority setting process right after the inauguration in November of 2022. And working with staff and the facilitator, Collier's project leaders, we were able to establish the priorities during the first 100 days of office. This worked out well for us as we were able to complete the project and align it to this budget. Next slide. So I think we established our council vision, which is Grimsby is an innovative, vibrant community where people and the environment matter. The strategic priority document identified 3 strategic priorities, 11 directions, and 34 actions. So the 3 main strategic priorities were people, places, and prosperity. And I did want to break down each of the priorities. The first priority is creating a high quality of life for our people. And I wanted to note some of the projects identified in our 2023 budget that aligns with the priority items. So just to highlight a few of the big ones, we will have a change to our governance structure, including there's a business case for a committee coordinator resource, a communication strategy plan, which includes a business case for a communication staff resource, the Peach King Center redevelopment, sustainable investment in community events, which includes a business case for a special events coordinator, our CMMS EAM project, which is our computerized maintenance management system, asset management system, and customer request module, which also includes a temporary full-time position. Next slide. Our second priority supports responsible and progressive growth. And some of the projects that were identified that aligns with our budget is the official plan update, which also includes one temporary full-time planner position, the Casablanca Beach Park development, the Main Street East Heritage Conservation District, including one temporary heritage planner, ensuring that the organization has the resources to support the legislative changes such as Bill 23 and Bill 109. This includes an additional permanent staff resource in planning and public works. And then we have our transportation master plan. The third priority, next slide. The third priority is supporting collective prosperity. We're looking at website improvements, digital Main Street, asset management plan for non-core assets and funding strategy, and our wastewater billing model review and water rate review that were completed in 2023 and forms part of this budget. So with that, I'm really honored to present Beth and her team to present the 2023 budget.
Thank you, Sarah. I was going to say honored in my speaking notes. Now I can't say that again. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to present the 2023 budget on behalf of our corporate leadership team. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, and to council. Hopefully you will enjoy my presentation this evening. Okay, first, next slide. So to set context, the town's base operating budget is $41.4 million in gross expenditures, and this includes all base services excluding projects operating in capital. The town provides and is the sustainable budget required to maintain our existing service levels. How this proportionately breaks down by service area per $100 of tax spent is shown on this chart. So last year we did a Loonie chart, and this year we've done it a little bit differently, but this is how our costs break down, or how our expenditures break down by service area. Next slide. So staff have prepared the 2023 operating budget using a corporate approach, taking into account the budget pressures identified while aligning to the town's long-term financial plans and important policy decisions of council. We adjusted the budget in all departments to what was needed regardless of previously budgets established. We considered 3 to 5 year trends, and as a result, some departments may have seen more or less of a percentage change relative to each other. The entire budget was drafted with a constant reminder of our strategy to mitigate our financial pressures while maintaining service and delivery at an affordable budget. This required a focus on our strategic objectives and cutting back in all areas available without impacting service level. The 2023 proposed budget maintains service levels while recognizing higher than average inflation, dedicates funding to ensure our assets are maintained in a state of good repair, includes strategic community investments, stabilizes and enhances town services, and supports the needs of the community. The 2023 operating budget presents an opportunity for the town to invest in resources and continue to improve its financial sustainability. Through this budget, we are investing in our people, places, and prosperity. Next slide. So this slide provides an overview of the risks that have been identified as we developed and present our 2023 budget. So they're being presented to you for consideration and awareness. So as I noted earlier, inflation, we were using or guesstimating or estimating a percentage of 6%. Federal and provincial policy and budget changes. So in addition to the impacts of Bill 23, DCs and other regulations to note pose additional pressures to our budget. So specifically Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone. And in order to help mitigate a portion of the risks associated with this legislation change, we do have an incremental FTE to support the work required in this budget. The introduction of provincial regulations related to implementation of new regulatory compliance requirements for municipalities for stormwater management systems and wastewater collection systems, similar to the Safe Drinking Water Act, requires staff to support this new legislation in the form of an operations technician and compliance coordinator. And again, with the asset management, it's heavily reliant on data collection and analysis and keeping that data current. And again, included in this budget is an FTE to support this work. One thing to note too is funding, so any provincial, federal grant funding. We've done a great job today attracting as much funding as possible. The risk is always that it's not guaranteed year over year. And just to note, our OMPF, or our Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, did decrease slightly year over year. We were at 39 and reduced to 36,000. OCIF, Ontario Community Investment Fund, went from 2.2 million to 1.9 million in 2023. So we do have a follow-up call with them to understand why that was and what we can do differently to ensure that we try and keep the funding at the highest level possible. And then asset management continues to pose a risk on the funding requirement side and with continued inflation, which we will be digging more into this ahead of the 2024 budget. Some of our economic factors, interest rates for investments, debt, utilities, fuel. So this budget includes higher interest revenue with a large portion of the revenue going to reserves. The risk here is when the interest rates come down, that will mean less money going to the reserves. So we tried to balance, on one hand, the high interest rates is a positive for us because we have money in the bank, so we're able to take that interest and use that to offset some of our base pressures as well as put additional funds to our reserves. But when the rates come down, and they will come down, we just have to be ready for that. And so that is the budget that's in front of you manages both sides of that, ensuring that we're able to offset some of our levy pressures, but also putting money into the reserve. Assessment, as you're aware, we're going towards an 8-year reassessment delay, so not sure what that's going to look like, the shifts between properties and tax classes and the appeals that will fall out of that. And labor market, which continues to be very competitive, internal to the organization as well as external. This can result in not having the required resources to deliver on programs and services in the town, and could also mean that we're not able to get the programs and services that we rely on from our external vendors. Next slide. So over the past few months, town staff have shared information with town council through our orientation, budget workshops, and council reports related to the pressures that need to be considered within the context of the operating budget. As noted earlier, inflation, supply chain impacts, and labor shortages in Ontario continue to pose an issue for municipalities. So left unaddressed, these pressures will significantly challenge the organization's ability to deliver at our current service level. So we've kind of identified 4 main buckets that the budget was categorized into. So inflationary and discretionary charges, as I noted, the consumer price index around 6%, and our heightened consumer demand, labor shortages, and strained global supply chain are some of the main factors contributing to our higher pricing. The town is experiencing increasing costs for contracted services, fuel, software license fees, and materials that place additional pressures on the budget. As I noted last night, though, we are seeing some of our contracts that are going out to market coming in with a bit more favorable pricing. And just to note, as the economy responds to higher interest rates and as the effects of elevated commodity prices and supply chain disruptions fade, the Bank of Canada expects inflation to fall to about 3% in late 2023 and then return to 2% in 2024. Fingers crossed. And as far as legislative changes, they do have impacts on our operating budget. So we talked about Bill 109. I'd also note the OMERS plan change, so that came into effect January 1st. So we are required to contribute to OMERS for all non-full-time staff. So every staff that works for the town is eligible to contribute to OMERS, in which the organization matches those contributions. We talked about asset management. So just to note, legislation requirements create the need for additional staff positions in order to support them. When new legislation is introduced, it puts additional strain on staffing resources which are already strained. Asset stewardship, understanding the importance of maintaining our assets and ensuring we have sustainable funding. This budget includes increased contributions to capital reserves. And through the water and wastewater review, we now have a council-endorsed plan to ensure a sustainable funding source for the maintenance of these assets going forward over the next 10 years. And enhancements and investments in alignment with council priorities. This budget does include some service level enhancements, which will be discussed on upcoming slides. Next slide. Next slide. So in addition to our base operating budget, we have projects. To increase transparency and accountability, we separate out operating projects from our base budget. This is the second year of doing this. These projects are one-time in nature, cyclical, and so they don't occur every year and generally do not result in assets. For these reasons, we track them separately to ensure they get funded from operating reserves and not capital reserves. They are strategic, directly connected to council priorities and/or legislation. Some have carried forward from 2022 and some are new. With 26 projects proposed in 2023, these initiatives are significant and an integral part of moving the town forward. They include initiatives such as the official plan, cybersecurity enhancements, record management, a financial system needs review, user fee review, just to name a few. And to see the full list of the projects, they can be found on page 140 to 141 of the budget book. And just like capital projects, these are funded mainly from reserves, development charges, and grants. So anything on that project listing is not impacting the levy directly. I also want to know we have 3 operating projects that include temporary full-time staff positions, and they're budgeted on a one-time temporary basis, and they're funded with external funding. One is the Bell Canada Fiber upgrade, which you did receive a report on. One is to support the Main Street East Heritage Conservation District study, so that's a carry-forward project. We did have someone on staff to date, and we'll continue that into 2023, and one to support the official plan project. Okay, next slide. The 2023 capital program is a significant investment for the town at $52.2 million. Similar to operating projects, there are some carry forward and some new initiatives included, and projects are mainly funded from reserves, development charges, and grants, and again, do not impact or not funded directly from the tax levy. With 67 projects planned, there's lots of amazing asset renewal and growth in infrastructure planned. Projects like the Peach King Center renovation and expansion, Casablanca Beach Park development, fire pumper rescue truck, Casablanca Boulevard interchange, park and fleet equipment replacements, investment in our technology, equipment and systems, roads resurfacing, water main rehabilitation, and the list goes on. And again, for the full listing of those projects and business cases, which were new this year, can be found on page 153 to 252 of the budget book. Okay, next slide. Before I get into this slide, I do want to note that this number over the 10 years has decreased slightly from the original presentation. We did find an issue with the data, so it is slightly lower. I guess that's a better thing at $189 million. So staff have invested in a 9-year capital forecast for 2023. This is the first year of doing this, which has been a great initiative, but has been a heavy lift internally. The value of this work is to better understand our capital needs in alignment with the asset management plan and our available funding, and better alignment of timing and resources available for project work. And as you can see, 2023 is an outlier. This is largely a result of the PKC Center project, as well as work to be completed on the Casablanca interchange. And along the bottom, it's kind of, you can't see on the slide there, but we have identified the funding sources available. So reserves, development charges, federal gas tax, which is Canada Community Building Fund, Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, which is OCIF, reserve funds, debt, and the debt on there we've split between funded by the levy and then the debt funded by development charges and other external funding. So that would be regional contributions or developer contributions as an example. So the 2023 budget and the 9-year forecast, believe it or not, is sustainable with our current levels of funding. There has been some consideration to inflation, and assumptions have been made on continued transfers to reserves and external funding. So this is assuming that our external funding will maintain at the current level and the transfers to the reserves will be continued. In addition to our multi-year budget, we did include 1% infrastructure levy in 2024 and a 2% increase in 2025. So I'm kind of dipping my toes in that water, knowing that that's something that we're going to have to talk about when we look at our assets overall and understanding what our obligations are to ensure we're maintaining those assets. So the forecast is a great starting point and a great step forward to ensuring sustainability and affordability in our capital program. And as we work through the non-core asset management plan, we will revisit the analysis and show how we were doing, which will form part of the financial funding plan for asset management and will likely require some harder decisions by council ahead of the 2024 budget. And I also wanted to note that this chart includes both growth and replacement projects, so not all of this ask relates to asset management or replacement assets. Next steps will be updating this data with non-core asset management plan and comparing to overall needs, and relook at funding available in addition to a debt strategy. And you can see pages 253 to 266 of the budget book. There's a listing of each project that makes up these spends by each year. Next slide. So along with all the great projects and initiatives the town is planning, we have also made significant improvements in our financial health. While there are many indicators of financial health, reserve strategy and balances are a key way in which municipalities can show they are investing in the future and supporting renewal and rehabilitation of vital assets in our community. In the past 10 years, the reserve balance of the town has improved, as shown on this chart. Through council's credit, when surpluses existed, they were reinvested in our reserves to improve our financial health. The 2023 budget includes an increased transfer to reserves of $6.9 million, which was $6.2 million in 2022. Our reserve trend is now on an upward one and shows a continued focus on asset management to sustain our estimated $1.3 billion in assets. We need to continue this trend with ongoing investment in asset renewal and rehabilitation in future years. And as I noted earlier, through our water and wastewater study, we have a plan now to ensure the sustainability of our water and wastewater assets over the next 10 years, which is great. And you can see a little dip there from 2022 to 2023, and that speaks to $21.3 million that we've committed to capital and operating projects in this 2023 budget in front of you. Next slide. Okay, so finally, before we move into summarizing the increases, I wanted to highlight the financial realities of this budget. There were some significant pressures in 4 key areas. The first of which is our committed labor contracts and benefit pressures, and this number is inclusive of the non-full-time OMERS costs, insurance premiums, reduced external revenue estimates. So we've seen the reduction as seen in our year-end results in our planning department, and we've also seen a reduction in our provincial offenses court, our POA courts. They've had less uptake in their fine processing, which in turn reduces the amount of money that the town receives, as those net revenues in the courts is split 50% to the region and 50% to the local level. And then in addition, our increased debt payments related to the Peach King Center have also been included in this budget at $132,000. In addition to the pressure, staff were able to make some base investments in our people, places, in support of the prosperity, such as increased transfers to reserves. So we were able to increase all of our transfers to reserves by 2%. And we topped up our election reserve, which I talked about last night at our year-end report presentation. Increase in the interest rates over base has transferred additional $981,000 to capital reserves. And as I noted earlier, the multi-year includes 1% infrastructure levy in 2024 and 2% in 2024. We've carved out some funds for investment in staff development and system modernization, such as our computerized maintenance management system, asset management system, cybersecurity improvements, and the list goes on. For context, all these items add up to about $2.2 million, which exceeded our overall financial increase proposed. You can see on the left-hand side there, base of roughly $650,000. And we're estimating assessment growth at approximately 1%. So that brings down our base pressure to the 3.15 that you see up in the top right-hand side of the slide. And if you want to flip to the next slide. So just to touch on our people strategy, our people are an essential component in achieving our strategic and corporate priorities. Through our people strategy, the town continues to invest in our people to meet the organization's human capital needs to serve our communities. In 2023, we have 4 main focus areas, which include competitive compensation, ensuring we can attract and retain staff based on market conditions and competition for talent, career and skill development, continuously empowering our people by providing training and development for current and future roles in the organization, and our goal is really to develop talent internally as much as possible. Number 3 is health and wellness. Employee health and wellness is a key priority for the team. Through our Employee Pulse survey, our people have told us that this is important to them. and a performance culture. So we're continuing to focus on maintaining a team dedicated to achieving measurable results in all positions across the organization. Investing in our people is critical and simply good for business. Next slide. So in addition to the 3.15 that was on the previous slide, we are asking for 0.75% on the levy to go to the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital funding strategy. So in addition to our base operating levy, we continue our investment in the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. The ask on the levy for 2023 is $116,000, which is this 0.75% increase on the levy. The 2023 amount has increased in 2023 to reflect higher than originally anticipated interest rates, as previously discussed. 2023 will represent our last tax increase to support this investment and will provide the town with enough base budget to make our annual debt payments for the next 30 years. Timelines that were recently provided by the hospital indicate payment of the $9.3 million in full 30 days prior to substantial completion, which they're estimating to be January 6, 2025. So the plan would be to issue the debt in 2024. Next slide. So this is just an overview with both the base pressures and the hospital. We're at the 3.9% number, and that's again after growth. So that's well below what we had anticipated the inflation to be when we were developing the budget. Okay, turning now to business cases. So as we look to move the organization forward, it's imperative that we invest in our resourcing. The following list of resources is in no particular order and reflects the priority positions as agreed to by the corporate leadership team. There was lots of hard discussions internally to bring forward these positions, and we feel that they meet the highest priorities of the organization. As noted previously, we are under-resourced when we look to our local area municipality counterparts of similar size and geographical size. So the first position is the asset and data analyst. This position will assist with asset management planning, asset condition assessments, and data collection and analysis necessary to support various legislative changes from the province. And legislative changes include asset management planning, municipal stormwater, and municipal and wastewater approvals, Bill 1 and Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act. The committee coordinator with the town beginning their new standing committee governance model, more hands-on support from the town's office, town clerk's office will be required, which cannot be fully supported with our existing staff resources. This position will also be leveraged to support the downtown improvement area, the customer service strategy, the bylaw department, and to assist with administration and organization of legal files. A communication specialist. This is to assist and improve communication within the organization and with residents, including creating and circulating marketing materials, managing the organization's social media presence, developing internal messaging campaigns, supporting council's strategic priorities, and working with the media to promote the organization and its activities. An intermediate development planner is an additional resource being requested to support the changes to the Planning and Ontario Heritage Acts, the official plan, Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act. In addition, this position will help to build resiliency for the planning team and support other significant projects and ongoing service to the community. Municipal law enforcement staffing. So this position will be created through the combination of two part-time municipal law enforcement officer positions, which are currently approved at a full-time equivalent of 1.4. The reason for this ask is largely a result of not being able to recruit on a part-time or temporary basis. In addition, the position's cost is offset by increased enforcement revenues expected to be generated, and so the bottom line for this position is no impact on the levy. A special events coordinator to support the community services department to continue the delivery of increased and high quality community events, both through direct delivery and liaison and with support services. The ask is for one permanent full-time special events coordinator and program related costs. Past events were largely supported by external grant funding and supported by staff. The risk of this position not being approved is the lack of resources to continue to run these types of events for the community into the future. So the bottom line impact of these 6 permanent FTEs is $432,000, which equates to approximately 2.8% on the tax levy. In addition to the programs and positions identified, we are also identifying a need to increase our budget for legal support in alignment with our current and previous years' experience. The current budget is about $350,000, and we're overspent this year by $445,000. And just looking on the average of the past 3 years, we're overspent by about $325,000. So we're recommending at this point in time $250,000 increase, which is approximately 1.6% on the levy. And then lastly is the grant program pilot. So council requested that staff develop a policy of eligible criteria to assist in evaluating funding requests from organizations, including process and reporting on the use of funds, and that the report be brought to council during the approval of the budget process. To address this, staff has prepared a business case for council's consideration, and it's on Appendix E of your report. And then upon approval, staff will work to develop a more formal policy and procedure document. This business case reflects a one-year pilot program with a budget of $100,000 funded from the council's strategic priorities reserve, and does not have a direct impact on the levy at this point in time. Next slide. So as we look to the future, I wanted to note the following opportunities and pressures. So from an opportunity perspective, with our continued investment in the modernization of our systems, such as the CMMS, asset management, website, financial system, these enhancements will provide better information to make better decisions and to improve our service level. Funding advocacy, we continue to monitor programs, example Fed, province, that might be introduced or awarded. Fees and charges, we know we're going to undertake a full review in 2023, and to ensure that the fees that we're collecting are representative of the costs that need to be incurred to support those fees in alignment with the Municipal Act, and ensuring that we're collecting an appropriate amount for the services being provided. And then our assessment base, this is part of our council strategic priorities, is to look to try and grow our commercial tax base versus our residential. So we look to see that happen in the future. And as far as pressures, our infrastructure levy, which I've noted a few times, and as well as the impact of our asset management plan and the impact on our funding available and coming up with a funding strategy. And then as we continue to grow and develop, there's going to be a required continued investment in our resources to accommodate growth and the complexities that go alongside this. So one thing I will note is that's not in this budget, but I am flagging for future years, is that we are going to need to bring on another park operator to support our parks as we continue to expand. So the example is the Casablanca Beach Park. Once that's developed, an incremental park resource will be required to support. Next slide. This slide is an overview of what was presented to Committee of the Whole on March 6th. So from a water perspective, we are looking at a $24 annual increase. So on an average bill at 193 cubic meters was approximately $600 per year. So that would go up to $624 in 2023. And again, this increase is largely driven by increased regional cost for water. And then on the wastewater side, an $8 annual rate increase. And this is based on restating 2022 along the same methodology as approved, and again on an average water usage of 193 and a rate of 1.23 per cubic meters, and $15 annual levy increase, again assuming the same methodology as being implemented in 2023 was implemented in 2022, represents a 4% increase. And again, the cost in wastewater is largely driven by the regional cost for wastewater. I will show the total impact of tax and the rate program year over year to show the net impact of the change in methodology and budget increases on the next slide. The approval of these increases is in alignment with our recently approved 10-year water and wastewater funding model, and over the next 10 years we have committed to closing the infrastructure gap. Next slide. So this slide is a bit busy in trying to be fully transparent in my numbers, but on the right-hand side, you can see for both rate and levy, we're looking on average of an increase of $131 per household, and that's a 5.5% increase. And next slide. So when we consider our proposed tax increases, we want to review this in the context of affordability. So we've shown this, this statistic or this graph in the past. It's from our 2022 BMA study. As you can see from this chart, Grimsby has the third lowest residential property tax per 100,000 of assessment and is 19% below the average of our comparator group. The next slide. And additionally, when considering overall affordability, our combined taxes, sewer and water as a percentage of household income, Grimsby is tied with Pelham with the lowest rate compared to our comparator group at 4.5%. And again, the source, it's not noted on this slide, but it's the 2022 BMA study. So we thought it might be helpful to pull this information together and show you the total impact on the property tax bill, again, for an average homeowner. The total tax bill is shared amongst the town and region and the school boards. So town-based operations had an increase of 6.02%, which is equals to an annual tax increase of $70 per year, or $6.25 per month. The town temporary special levy for the hospital will add an additional $9 per year, or approximately 75 cents on a monthly tax bill. The town sewer levy is increasing 4%. And so summarized together, the results is a total tax impact on the tax bill of 6%. And overall, taking the region and education levies into account, there will be a combined tax bill impact of 6.3%. And so the 6.3%, this does include the introduction of the transit levy, which you can see we've calculated there $131 in 2023. And again, that's based on the assessed value of $442,000. And these numbers do reflect the transit upload to the region of the 1.6%, the increase in the legal fees, and then the enhancement investments at $431,000. So overall, levy increase of $99 per year, or about $8.25 per month. Next slide. So based on approved regional 2023 tax rates and our proposed town 2023 increases, the region would represent 56% now on the average tax bill, with 32% coming to the town and 12% going to the province for education. Next slide. So to conclude, I really want to thank staff, CLT, and council for the opportunity to present this budget today. It provides valuable services and initiatives to the Grimsby community while being fiscally responsible, financially sustainable, and supports the needs of the organization to meet council's strategic priorities. And before I end, I do want to give a big shout out to the finance team here that worked tirelessly behind the scenes over the last little bit to bring this budget to fruition. We're proud of where we are at, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have. I think the strategy maybe was to throw the recommendations from the report up on the screen and maybe go one recommendation at a time.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your presentation, Beth, and thank you very much to the finance team for getting this together, and thank you very much for all the CLT and staff heads for really coming together as a team to put this budget forward. So we'll start with questions now.
Maybe we'll go step by step.
Well, let's go step by step, yeah. So we'll start with any questions for number one. Maybe just.
The highlights,
You kind of set it up for us, Beth, and then,
Compared to your presentation, yeah.
yes, thanks. Give us a little guidelines.
Through you, Mayor. So the first recommendation is basically, this is our base levy ask. So we are asking that the levy be increased by $513,000 roughly, or 2.29% over the 2022 levy. And so this includes the transit upload to the region. So we've reduced by 1.61 for that, and our assessment growth of 1%. So this would be, approval of this recommendation would be approval of the base budget as presented. So the contractual pressures, wages, anything that was in the base budget that's status quo service delivery. So does anybody have any questions on that?
Councillor DeFlavio.
So the first one is basically the entire budget then, so we're starting from the top. I have a lot of questions. So you, on page 2 of 10 of your report, the chart with the base operating levy and the water rates and the wastewater operating levy is in there. Now, can we start with the wastewater operating levy? So the wastewater operating levy is being reduced by $1.86 million, right? And that's being
All
shifted.
right, Councillor DeFlavio, that, like, the wastewater is number 5.
Right, but that, sorry, I understand that,
Yeah.
but the cost of it being moved from one column to the other is in number 1, is it not?
Through the mayor. No, I think the recommendation number 5 is the levy impact of the 4.3.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, 371. Do you see the numbers
Yeah.
tie out to that? So that is a separate recommendation to approve that levy for the sewer, the wastewater levy.
Okay, through you, Mayor, is the increased staff included in number 1? Is that a different?
Through the mayor, that is actually recommendation number 3, that the increase
Okay.
of 431,000 or 2.8.
I'll wait till we get to number 3 then.
I tried to, through the mayor, I tried to break it out so each one is not really dependent on the other one, so you could approve, maybe in hindsight, we could have dropped number 1 to the final. Yeah, I mean, we can do whatever.
Yeah, well, why don't we start with number 2 and then with 1 being the actual
Okay.
final?
If I could then, your worship, I have a question about number 2. So the report indicates then nearly $800,000 spent on legal this past year. Obviously, that's a huge concern, you know, spending nearly $1 million a year on legal. Without getting into the details, I guess my question is, why are we spending so much on legal? For $800,000 a year, why don't we just have a staff lawyer? You know, like I don't understand if that is an ongoing cost. I mean, if we look legal for the last 4 years, let's say, or the last 5 years, and is this something projected to be an ongoing cost because of, you know, increased Ontario Land Tribunal hearings and things like that? And if so, then I would prefer to move that to another column and hire somebody so that we can call them anytime, and it doesn't cost us extra that we actually have a lawyer in-house. So $800,000 is a pretty significant salary for any lawyer, so I think we'd get a pretty good representation for that amount of money. So anyway, if we can have a breakdown of how that is being spent, why it's so high, and if you believe that it's an ongoing cost, then does it make sense to hire an actual lawyer that works for us?
I'll start and then maybe Sarah can jump in. So we did attempt to summarize the legal expenditures. We just didn't have enough time to vet it with all the parties to ensure that we're classifying every invoice correctly. It's largely driven by appeals and planning appeals. I can say that with certainty. So, is the past the best predictor of the future? Like what's going to change going forward that would maybe influence that to be different? Looking at the past, like I said, we are on average $325,000 over budget for the past 3 years. So we know we are spending more than what we've been budgeting on a more permanent basis. I think we did talk internally about if this was at the discretion of council to possibly investigate what that could look like to bring in an in-house lawyer. I would ask that maybe we approve that recommendation as is, and then in addition to staff, we know we need the money, so leave the $250,000 in the budget, but maybe add something to the recommendation that staff investigate I'm not thinking of the right words, the possibility of leveraging possibly a permanent full-time employee to provide those services.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, through you. So 1% was what, 152,000, 155,000. So we're talking about not just what we already levy for legal, which is 450,000. So 3% of everything everybody pays in taxes to the town of Grimsby is already being spent on legal. Actually more, because we were over budget this year by 350,000. But we're talking about going from 450 to $700,000 a year for legal, which would be 4.5% of what everybody pays in their taxes just being spent on legal. Is that comparable what other municipalities are spending? Because that seems like a really, really high number on legal. Like maybe we need to find other legal representation. I don't know what the solution to this is, but that does not seem like a reasonable amount of money. I don't want to be the person who brings up the old days, but that I don't remember ever spending anywhere near that in the past on legal. So what has changed over the last 4 or 5 years that's causing that huge increase in legal fees?
Just through the mayor, just to note that the expenditures that we're talking about, there are some consultant fees in there to support some of the tribunals or the appeal process as well. So it's not all legal costs per se. I don't know, Sarah, did you want to chime in?
So yes, I mean, legal it's not just legal, it includes our planning experts, our heritage experts, our consultants. So there's a bit of a mix in our legal budget. I mean, that's something we can look at to clean up and define it a little more, but it is a much bigger kind of bucket.
Through you, Mayor, I think it's very important to separate those things because, we talk about transparency all the time and I think that people need to understand the cost of every time we appeal something, it costs X number of dollars. So if we can find a solution that is one that's middle of the road, that's a Made in Grimsby solution, that's not an OLT solution, and it saves us a couple $100,000, then I think that that's something we need to understand the cost of. So these need to be, in my opinion, very clear and public costs. So we went to the OLT in 2022. It cost us, for this specific appeal, it cost us X number of dollars in legal fees, X number of dollars for heritage expert, X number of dollars for our planning consultant. That's what this appeal cost. That shouldn't be something that's not a secret. That shouldn't be something that needs to be kept behind closed doors. It doesn't have to say Bob got paid $250,000, but the amount of money that we're spending on these appeals, I think does need to be public. So if we can make that more transparent, I'd appreciate that. The fact that we don't even know specifically how much we spent, I mean, not only the public doesn't know, but we as a council don't even know how much we spent on each specific appeal, makes it very difficult for us to make decisions going forward on whether we want to appeal something again. Because the cost needs to be something that we consider when we do these things. There are some things that we do because we really believe in them, but there are some things that we do sometimes that are kind of on the fence decisions, and that might be a very important thing that we consider in our decision-making process. So I would like that to be a little bit more transparent. Thank you, Worship.
Beth?
So through the mayor, one of the things we've been talking internally about is doing an annual report at a minimum, just around our claims. Like right now, we're preparing our financial statements and we provide an estimate in our statements around our legal liabilities. So it would be in closed session, but just to give an overview of our current claims and also speak to the legal costs that's been incurred for the previous year, which I think will be helpful.
Councillor Howe?
In respect to that, at any time has that question been asked when the council is dealing with something and with a planning issue, is for the most part planning issue? Well, what's it going to cost us? Never been asked. I've never heard it asked.
I've asked it every time. Every time I've asked it.
I haven't heard. Okay, what was your answer? What the answer you got?
We don't know.
Councillor Frick?
Totally agree with what, sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Totally agree with Councillor DeFlavio. We budgeted that, what was the total amount for legal and consultants? What was the total amount?
Through the mayor, 350,000 roughly.
Sorry?
350.
350 on top of what we spent last year as base. Yes?
So we spent 350 and I believe we were over by 445. So we spent about $800,000.
I think we have enough, we have at least 3 years of history right now on legal fees and consulting fees. So in the best interest of this year, obviously we need to work it into this budget, but if we could do something, do a study quicker and find a way to offset that cost or decrease it by maybe hiring a lawyer on staff or maybe hiring a consultant on staff or whatever, then we may not have to spend that amount of money for the whole year. We could probably sort this problem out mid-year. I mean, if we get ahead of it. Am I making sense? If we could hire someone to full-time to do the legal work, and we hire them halfway through the year, that means half that, we may be able to save half that money.
Through the mayor, yes, but then to go out and hire the external legal support would be
I know it's a long process, yeah, but if we don't start soon, I guess we'll just be putting it off till next year. I'd like to see something happen this year on that one. I think we belabored that one pretty good. I'll come back to another question. I just think that we should probably jump on this one as fast as possible because I think it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. It's gone from I think the first year on council was 200,000, then it was 250, then it was 300, now it's 450 and it keeps going up. So maybe if we break it down and understand it a little better, we might be able to do something more with it. All right, I'll let someone else ask a question. I'll come back in a second. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy?
Thank you. I think what, like others have said, we need to do an analysis of what we're paying for in legal. Because I know when we have an OLT case, it's not just the lawyer, but we also have to hire planning experts that give testimony, and it's probably paid through the lawyer. So I think we need to better understand kind of what we're paying for, and I think. Just sort of in defense of past, I'll say some past decisions, it's not always about the money, but it's about what are you trying to defend for your town, because those are values that are important for your town. So it's not always just to win, but it's also thinking about how you're protecting the town in future instances. So I'd say maybe we put aside the money that's required right now, and then do a deep dive, and maybe we can let some of the money go and look at possibly hiring our own lawyer if that's what we're actually spending on, or are we spending it on experts? What kind of cases are we are going forward? For instance, are we going to OLT because we missed the deadline when we had to respond within so many days, and we did it, and our only way to have any kind of voice in the process now becomes at OLT. So maybe some of the front end in terms of planning and having resources there to meet those timelines, so we don't have projects that are only voices then to go to OLT. So I'm thinking that this is more a complex problem than just how much we spend on legal fees.
Beth?
So am I hearing maybe consensus that we approve the recommendation as is with a further report back to council in 2023 ahead of the 2024 budget to have staff investigate the possible use of internal staff to offset maybe some of these services that we're paying for externally?
All right, Councillor DeVoley.
Thank you. I have a question to Beth as we're talking about the legal. My understanding from my fellow councillors was that we would first and foremost be interested in understanding what we spent in 2022, and then sort of progress into 23 and consider what our various options are. So not thinking 23 expenses for the 24 budget. I think if I understood my fellow councillors, the 22 expenses for the 23 action plan, call it that, right? The analysis of that. I know, we've talked about some of these things even in our preliminary consultations with you. And I was so pleased to see that the rate that our lawyers do charge us, I found to be entirely comparable to rates of law firms close by too. I think I came at this with thinking that the Toronto rates were going to be considerably higher, and yet the rate we're being charged really is not, I would say. The other thing I think we need to consider when we get into some of these questions, besides what exactly is the skill set we're looking for, is a lawyer is not a lawyer. Just like a public works person or a planning person, they all have specialties as well, right? So you're never going to find a lawyer that's skilled in planning and general corporate counsel, in this, that, and the other thing. Inevitably, many municipalities have general counsel, but they don't necessarily have planning legal experts. And so if it turns out that that's where our need is, we have to think very carefully about this. There's a lot to be gained when you are part of a team, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, or anybody else. It helps to have associates around, and when you stand alone in an organization, eventually you lose your edge, I will say. So this entire question is a big question. It's definitely something that I think we need to learn about what we've spent in 2022, what's on the books in 2023, before we actually get into the details of our action plan and how we deal with it. And so I would be quite in favor of supporting the budget as it is, and then having an action plan going forward on it.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I am also supportive of hiring legal if it can bring our costs down. Good point by Councillor DeVoley, though, about how there's specialties for different legal. I'm just wondering if our CAO can possibly give her opinion, because she has a legal background. I'd like to hear it if that's possible.
Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have to concur with Councillor DeVoli. I think what we will attract is a general municipal lawyer. I don't think we'll get the specialized planning lawyer that we do really require in this town. So it would be a hybrid model if we do this. A lot of the general work can be done in-house or the legwork of the file, and then we send it off to our external lawyers to kind of do the heavy lifting, to say. So at the end, I think we still need to commit to this kind of number to be able, even with the hybrid model, to be honest. And with any legal files, right, there's so many unknowns, right? So it's really hard for us to sometimes estimate what the cost will be or break it down ahead of a file, right? We can give you the general estimates, but if something happens and we have to hire a third-party consultant, right, that's a cost, right? All those unknown variables that it's hard to really say, and it's a case-by-case basis, right? So it's really hard to determine. So I think to be safe, to have the 250,000 extra will help, and we will come back with a report to provide all the different options or some better policies in place to kind of help us with the transparency piece. I think that's probably the best step for council moving forward.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I gotta say, I agree with pretty much everything Councillor DeFlavio said. I gotta say, I'd like to see our legal costs go down, not up, if that were to be possible, whatever. I think hiring somebody to specialize in this might be a good idea, but also just taking the preface of seeking negotiations over fighting legally would probably be the most substantial way of keeping this cost down. Like Councillor DeFlavio said, a made in Grimsby solution is much better than an Ontario Land Tribunal decision, and I think that if we all take on that mindset, that'll be the most effective.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further questions on that one, we'll move it to number 3 then. Councillor Howe?
My report 2312 here is so, was there one dropped off of this? Like your list, there's something on mine that you've got me out of sync on the numbers.
Oh, no, that's administrative. Everything's still in order. It's just not, it's because number 1, that report.
Yep.
Is not numbered 1 on top. So those numbers have just shifted. So all the recommendations are still the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would drop off 1.
Just 1, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's no change.
Thank you, Beth.
So questions on number 3? Councillor DeFlavio.
I'm willing to defer if other people want to go first. I don't
Beth,
want to.
did you want to say something first?
No,
Yes.
Through the mayor, are we clear? So this recommendation is for the 6 permanent FTEs in addition to the program-related costs, and that they're listed out in the body of the report. It totals 431, 853, and 2.8% on the levy. So this is about the 6 positions that were listed.
So, does somebody else want to go first? I don't always need to be first. I'm fine with waiting.
Hey, you put your hand up.
Okay. So, I'm torn here because I have a lot of respect for our staff and what they do. At the same time, though, 6 new staff positions, and the cost impact of those 6 staff positions is something that's really hard for me to deal with. Dealing with it at a committee of the whole thing, this way kind of makes me uncomfortable because generally we would discuss each one of those in detail at the committee level, and that's why I like the committee process, is because then before it gets here, there would be a thorough discussion of those things. But since we're doing it this way, I guess I'll go through them one at a time and offer my feelings, which is all I can do. I know there's been a lot of talk about a communication specialist. I still don't see the value for money in spending $100,000 on that position. I'll keep that one simple. As far as the committee coordinator position is concerned, again, I've got a great deal of respect for our parks and recreation and culture staff. But we, last year, had one of the biggest events that we're ever going to host in Grimsby and did it in-house. And this year, we're saying we need another person, a committee, I skipped ahead, sorry. The committee coordinator. Committees are supposed to make it easier for our clerk, not more difficult, in my opinion. They're supposed to be dealt with at the staffing, at the staff level, so each department organizes its committee meeting, does so following the process set out by the clerk. There shouldn't need to be a committee coordinator. Again, we had committees for the entire history of Grimsby up until 4 years ago, and there was never a committee coordinator position. I don't know what's changed over the last 4 years that would require us to have that position. I still think that our staff can deal with it. The administrators within each department can lay out the agenda. In fact, 4 years ago, we didn't even have a deputy clerk. So, there are already additional staff now that didn't exist under the previous committee system. Municipal law enforcement, while I understand it's a $0 levy impact, that money still comes from taxpayers. I don't like a system that is punitive in nature. I like one that is meant to teach people. So, we don't want people parking in a certain place. You ticket them hoping that they won't do it again. Our budgeting should not be based on how much we're going to hammer people to pay for that position. And that's basically what this is saying. It's saying it's going to be paid for by the number of tickets we give out. I don't like a system that requires people to be punished in order to pay for a position. The special events coordinator is what I was talking about before, $128,000 levy impact, $127,860 to put together special events. I cannot, in the current economic conditions that we face, that we're faced with, all of the things that we're dealing with on a national and provincial and local level as far as inflation are concerned, support spending that much money on events. I know that we have events, but I can only think of 2 or 3 major events. I know there are smaller events that occur. But again, $128,000 on the few events that we have per year, when we had one of the biggest events we're ever going to host, again, like I said last year, in Grimsby, without an events coordinator. Our planning staff, I have to support, I understand. This is one where I feel like perhaps if we had more planning staff, perhaps maybe we can avoid some of those timed out OLT things that we deal with. So if it helps us reduce our legal costs, then I'm okay with increasing planning staff. And the asset and data analysis, the $0 levy increase, that's one that seems to be a legitimate $0 levy increase, unlike the one where we have to ticket people in order to make it a $0 levy increase. So that's my feeling on those things. I really feel like it's a tighten the belt year, not a increase the staff by 6 year. I hope that we get to a point where we have money to spend on increasing staff, but I don't think we're at that point right now. And it's going to be really hard for me to vote in favor of any staff increases this year in any department. That's my feeling. And I'm sorry to be I want to be supportive, but I have to also think about how much it's going to cost. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree to some extent with Councillor DeFlavio. I find it hard to be investing now in an events coordinator. Although I do feel quite strongly that we need a communications person, and that it's really important to better do the kind of outreach that we need to do and get people aware of what's happening in town and to increase that engagement. Oftentimes, I think we should be doing press releases and letting people know some of the good things we're doing or some of the opportunities that are available to people in the community. But we just don't have the right staff and skill set to be able to do that and have somebody dedicated to that kind of engagement. I think the town would really benefit from. So those are my I'd say my two big concerns. One, an events coordinator at this point at that cost is a little too much for this time of year, but I feel strongly we need the communications person. Thank you.
Councillor Sharwa and Councillor DeVolder.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I'm wondering if we can possibly piece this out, because I think I have heard from a bunch of different councillors here and there that coordinator, the special events coordinator is one that we might not want. So I'm wondering if, and that's one I don't think this is the appropriate time. The communications person, I think we still need a communications person, but I'm wondering if we could cut that down to, I don't know, a part-time position of some sort, if it's hybrid or whatever. So can we possibly go position by position when we're starting with the special events?
Beth?
Through the mayor, I think what we were hoping here is staff worked to bring forward this list of staff, and we made some concessions in maybe some other areas to prioritize these staff. And we did come in at a budget at 6% all-inclusive of these staff. So I guess I was hopeful that if the conversation could be geared more towards what is an acceptable, how do you feel about the overall pressure on the levy versus specifically each individual position. Of course, I will defer to you, but I was hopeful that we could approve that in block and not pick off certain positions, and or maybe ask staff to go back and take another look at it and come back with a lesser ask.
Councillor DeFlavio?
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you. The concern about doing it as a block is precisely what I said when I first started speaking, and that is, this is an awkward way to do this. Like these discussions should have happened one by one at a committee level, where you can iron out and each of these things can be justified and then brought forward. But that wasn't the way that it was done. So we're looking at it. We have to look at it here on a piece-by-piece basis, unless we just reject the whole thing and send it back and say, take another kick at the can. I don't know. I don't know what you're suggesting. You're suggesting we approve it the way that it is? Because then I'm going to say, I'm going to vote against it. So
Through the mayor, respectfully, I think we were trying to keep the budget more at a strategic level as far as like what we are aligning our ask to the council's strategic priorities, how we felt, and within a budget that was what we felt was affordable and sustainable. So to keep the conversation more around the overall impact on the ratepayers, and then also, that we're meeting your objectives and aligning with the work plan and the strat plan that you set forward. So we do feel like we're bringing this forward in a way that aligns with that. Respectfully, I think if we did talk about that at individual standing committees, I think we would still end up in a position where one committee feels really strongly about a particular position, and then when it's brought to open session, maybe others might not feel as strongly as the committee that's recommending the position. So I do see value in having these conversations in a more open forum so that we're comparing and contrasting across the different lines of business. So I am open to what you want to do. If you want to, I guess my recommendation would be, if you wanted to remove a position from that list, that you ask that the increase then be decreased, if it's 431 with all six, that if, say, you want to remove one position at $100,000, that you ask that recommendation be reduced by $100,000 and to remove that one position, and we can approve it that way.
Councillor DeVoley.
Yes, Mayor Jordan, a question for Beth to carry on along this line of thought. Would it help, though, to hear many of our fellow councillors' opinions on, where we see the priorities again or not? Because certainly these 6 positions, you tried to align with the strategic priorities that we laid out, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, we also, when we were talking about our strategic priorities, we talked about the timing of them as well, right? And so I think what I'm hearing from my fellow councillors is that on things like a special events coordinator, that aligns with our strategic priorities, but perhaps it could wait for another year or two, right? So I like your suggestion that, perhaps we say, well, we can approve number 2, but the dollars need to be reduced by 100,000, and staff go back and figure out which are the most critical of those positions and how you're going to do this. I could support that. But at the same time, I think, you might want to hear still some comments as to which of the positions really we felt had a business case and which didn't, right? Because when you go back to look at it, you're going to still want to know sort of, were you convincing enough on some of these positions or not? How do you know which way to go, right? So I will leave those comments there. I share some of the concerns, obviously, about the special events coordinator. I want to just add one more comment, if I could, about the communication specialist. And I think I came to realize that what we're seeing in our social media of the town is really the work of many of you. Many of the directors are the ones who are actually posting and doing it. And I look at that and think, how lovely, but what an enormous time burden for you when you could be working on things that are more in line with your skill set, and when the communications could be done by someone at a lower wage rate. And so realistically, that's the trade-off, I think, when we're looking at a communication specialist, is that these people are not going to be paid at the level of our corporate leadership team. They're going to be paid less, and that's going to free up the time. A little bit from absolutely everybody is going to go a long ways at the senior level, is my impression. Thank you.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I've spoken to Sarah, and I've spoken to Beth, and I've spoken to some of the other folks in the room here. And I know that since we've been on council, and we've been understaffed in many areas, and I think we're more or less trying to catch up. That's how I read this, and I know that we've struggled over 4 years with not enough staff, not enough expertise in the right areas. And I think this is the year, I know it's a bad year, it's really a tough year, unfortunately, but this was the year we were hoping to catch up, because it's a different council with a different mindset. I was convinced by what I heard that we are really basically catching up, in most cases here, by putting people in place which you should have had in place 4 or 5 years ago. And if we want to move ahead as a town and as a council, I think we need, and we put a lot of onus on staff to get a lot of information for us and a lot of details. Maybe we could have decreased the legal bill and the consulting bill if we had some of these folks on staff already. So, we're talking $400,000 and so odd for staff, but at the same time, we're approving over $400,000 and so odd for legal. Something doesn't make sense there. So I think I'm going to go along with the approving these staff, because I do believe we need more expertise now, and we want to move the town forward with the strategic priorities we have, which is going to be a lot of work. And I know, for example, that in Parks and Recs, I mean, I see Sarah pulls her head out from underneath her desk every once in a while, just to let us know she's there, because I know she's got so much going on and so much, and has to coordinate so much. So I'm sorry, I have to go completely against what you're all saying, and I do think we should find the expertise, put them in place, and move this town forward as we should have done maybe 4 or 5 years ago. That's my speech, so, and thank you for putting it together, Beth. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bradley.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I do think we need to add a lot of expertise, but I do not agree that we need to add it in the areas of communications and committee coordinator and with the Parks and Recs. I think we'd be better off going from the top-down approach and filling our major vacancies, and then going down from there in more in technical and skilled roles.
Councillor Howe.
Through you, Mayor. Couple of things. There was said the municipal law enforcement, the municipal law enforcement, one permanent, that's being made up of 2 part-timers. So they're taking 2 part-timers, making it 1 person. And the fact is that if someone is not obeying whatever bylaws that they may be breaking, then how the heck can we get their attention without finding them? I mean, you can, the old days, you may be able to take a Billy and give him a smack on the back of the head, but you can't do that now. So you got to take take the money, and it's there. And let's go downtown and take a look at parking. I mean, there are people that just don't care whatsoever. And so are you prepared just to walk away from, oh, well, it's okay, I'll pat you on the head and give you a little participation ribbon. Doesn't cut it, so, but there's the municipal law. The committee coordinator, I asked the question. And the committee coordinator is coming about because of, we want to talk about transparency. We want to talk about openness. Well, we put these shows on, you got to have all our cameras and all the sound systems, and we've got to dot our I's, cross our T's. We've got resolutions that start with 14 whereases. Let's just accept that it's what we're asking or what people expect. Well, gee, I didn't see that on TV. Well, why don't you drag your tail down here, because we're open for business now. Communication specialists. People have said, we're not telling anybody anything. Like, we got to tell people things. They got to know. How come they don't know? Because we don't have somebody that we can depend on to put that message out, to brand us. Let's say branding. Let's use a name that or a term that bounces around in business. The planner, no doubt, because I think that I know for a fact that we're swamped on that one. Asset data analyst, asset management is, we got to have a better handle on our monies and where everything is. And that person right there is probably going to be invaluable. The special events coordinator, that is open. I know that people last year, as Nick said, did a heck of a job. They're to be commended for it. But staff has asked the CLT, and have banged their heads together and to come up with what they think is the best. And I got to tell you, I've been away from this for a long time, but it's a pretty good collection of people that we're sitting here looking out at, and we're depending on them to give us the straight bill of goods. That's the purpose of staff, is to provide you the information, the objective information as to what you need to make your decision. So, there's a lot to think about.
Beth?
I don't know if it's helpful I was hoping maybe we could wrap up this recommendation and then have a break. But could I think it would be good to maybe hear from Sarah Sweeney just in regards to her coordinator position, and maybe Sarah Kim in regards to the committee committee role.
Yeah, I totally agree to move that way, because of the way this budget was designed, and because of the gaps that we've had, and trying to come in at a good percentage, but actually adding to the municipality. It's something that we're not in an area where we're not live streamed. Before 2018, there was no live streaming of any of the meetings. That's put an enormous task on staff to get it up and running, to get it out to the public. And the number of employees that we have here, because this budget has been rolled out in a way to do what's best for the town, following our strategic priorities. These positions, although they are a cost this year, there's something that will fill in and will make everything else work better, in my opinion. And I can see that senior staff has worked that way for that goal moving forward. So Councillor Frake, I'd just leave it at that.
Yeah, I like Beth's idea of asking each one of the senior staff to speak to their person that's on this list. But when you're speaking to the person that you want to add, let us know what the downside is if we don't get that person. Because I think that's really important to know that. Like, what are we at risk for, whether it be costs, whether it be something that doesn't get done? We put ourselves out there and become liable for something because we don't have a person on staff. Look at it and let us know also what the downside is of that as well, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Beth.
Yes, all right, do we want to start with Sarah or Sarah Kim? Sarah Kim or Sarah Sweeney? See, it can be right twice.
We're all contentious here.
See,
Do you want to do all three?
Through your worship, I mean, if there are ones that people agree on, and we can move past, that's fine, but even in the planning department, we don't have a director of planning. I don't understand how we can hire a new staff member in a department where we don't have a director. The director's job would be to hire that staff member. So unless we have a timeline that I'm not aware of where that director of planning is going to be hired in the next 3 or 4 months, then we should be budgeting, even if it's a new staff position, for half a year of that new staff position. So the cost of that should be cut in half. We're already in April, basically, before this budget gets approved. So, these are all based on full year numbers, I'm assuming. And so if it says 120,000, it's really 90,000, or is it, if it says 120,000, it's actually 150,000?
Through the mayor, I would like to speak to that one. So the numbers that we're asking for are the cost of the full position for the full year. And I feel strongly that that is the way to go, because we are hiring that staff on a permanent basis. And so we need base budget. So you're right, there would be savings this year, but we are committing long-term to that employee.
Right. Sorry, Your Worship, through you, I agree. I just think it's also, like anything else, important for people to understand the actual cost will be. So we're budgeting if we're budgeting for $120,000 and the person doesn't get hired till July 1st, the actual cost is going to be $60,000, which will result in a $60,000 surplus next year, which is fine, because you do have to budget long-term. That's a position. That's another thing, though, further to what you said, that people need to understand, is that new staff is a permanent cost for municipality. It's not $125,000 this year. It's $125,000 increased by cost of living or whatever the staff gets every year for the rest of your life. For the rest of the time that you're paying taxes in the town of Grimsby, that's a cost that will be incurred. It's not a one-time So that's a very important point that you made. But I think it's important that people also understand that we're budgeting for something that might not be a cost that's incurred this year and could result in a surplus, will result in a surplus. We're already budgeting for a surplus for next year.
Do we want to have a break? And then we can have the staff then prepare their speaking notes for the positions?
I think we should just push through this one and then tackle the next one while it's fresh in our mind.
Sarah Kim, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. So maybe I'll speak to the two positions. The committee coordinator, so I was just trying to make some notes. Some of the things that did change is live streaming, right? We're live streaming all our standing committees and our council meetings. Believe it or not, a lot of the technology behind requires a lot of work. So there's a lot of things that the deputy clerk is currently doing during the meetings. There's going to be much more meetings. Instead of 2 meetings a month, just for standing and council alone, it's 7 meetings a month, right? So we're supporting all that as well. We have to have better practices. We used to have previously in our standing committees, the directors clerk the meeting, do the minutes, and present all the reports. You cannot do that. You really have to have a trained clerk for accountability and transparency. I've seen some of these committees where there's no line of communication, for example, DIA, right? I did help them out at the end of the term this year, and I saw how much work is required to update the terms of reference, their election rules, the public meetings, and educating them on just legislative requirements, right? And the training required to train our staff and the lay members, right? That takes a lot of work. And we changed our agenda management software to eScribe to allow for more functions like voting online and whatnot. So all that training has to also happen for anyone else to be able to clerk the meeting. So a lot of that pressure right now is put on clerk staff, and we're not a huge team to be able to support all the standing committees, council meetings, and advisory committees. So this downside with that is we really will, if we don't get this position, we'll have to reduce service levels, rethink our governance structure change, and we could possibly lose staff because we are putting more pressure on clerk department. So that would be my thing on the committee coordinator. For the bylaw enforcement officer, currently we have 1 full-time staff doing both parking enforcement and bylaw enforcement, and that's too much pressure to just have one person do the whole department. We really want to break the 2 part-time, and as stated, we cannot find 2 part-time positions. We went through 5 rounds, cannot find anyone. Finally got 1 temporary contract position full-time. So we would just want to make that temporary full-time into a permanent full-time, and they'll be focused, then 1 person can be focused on the parking enforcement and 1 can be focused on more of the bylaw enforcement. So I'll take any questions. Yeah.
Councillor Bradzi.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. I was just kind of curious if you would provide up like a ballpark figure, how much is our transition to the committees going to cost us?
I mean, I haven't done the breakdown of it, so I wouldn't have it on the top of my mind. With Beth?
So through the mayor, obviously the position cost is roughly $70,000. So I think that's largely the cost of that transition. Obviously, we have the rooms, we have the technology. One of the costs we did consider internally on the base budget was just sometimes paying overtime for staff to be in meetings after hours and kind of right-sizing our policy around call-in and not using the right terminal. On-call, thank you. And so that does have a cost internally as well. Like the more meetings that we have after hours, the more staff that we have to have clerks, we have to have IT. There's always someone in IT sitting over there supporting us behind the scenes as well. So there are some, the more meetings that we have obviously has an incremental cost and lost productivity for the staff that are participating in those meetings.
Councillor Korstanji.
Through you, Chair. So just to touch on that, so what we're paying in overtime for the staff to be here at all these evenings and taking away and the lost production time, essentially, we're already paying for that position then, if not more in overtime pay.
All right, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to go, the reason I asked was because Sarah Kim kind of mentioned to overtaxing our staff and maybe struggling with retention, and seeing as we want to hire so many people to go the opposite way and putting more staff on, or taxing them out. I see those costs maybe even being double the committee coordinator being, like taxing all the overtime. But I don't know, expect us to have an exact number on that, but I'm just got me thinking about that anyway. So.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. So with this committee coordinator, I had looked up to see where our salaries are, and they always seem to be in the upper, like, we pay very well now, and I know that we had like the changes in salaries, but Oakville has a committee coordinator right now. Grimsby is 85,000, right, 688, and Town of Oakville is hiring right now for 72,000, right? Yes, go ahead.
Through the mayor. I just want to clarify, so that cost that's in the business case would be inclusive of benefits. So if you're looking at postings externally, it wouldn't be. So we roughly estimate around 25% for benefits. So it would be, the salary would be 25% less than that.
Okay, I'm still, I can't approve everything on, like, all six. So if we're going to do it that way, then I'm going to be a no. So, and I don't know how other people feel, but I still feel like we need to go through each of these positions. And even if it's a matter of reducing things from full-time to part-time, then maybe that's the solution. But I can't approve all six as is.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the other concerns I have is that as we overwork our staff, and I know they all work a lot of hours, a lot of nights. I mean, some of you guys in the last 4 years have been up 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning, as we sit in this council chamber. So I know how much time you put in, how many hours you put in, a lot more than I would have put in my corporate life, I can tell you that. The other thing is, if we overwork our staff, I mean, and they say, well, the hell with this, I'm getting out of Grimsby, I'm getting out of Dodge, then we have to replace that person. Not only are you trying to replace a body, you have to replace the experience. That's hard to get. So it's not just replacing a body, then you have the time taking, trying to find someone, and the market is getting smaller, I think, for finding expertise and staff right now. So we don't want to lose any staff, that's for sure. So if we overwork our staff, and I really trust that each one of the senior managers, I put a lot of thought into these positions. And we didn't hear from all of them. So let's be careful we don't bite off more than we can chew here and push this thing down the road so far that we lose staff because they're working too much and we have to rehire staff. And we can't, and it takes a long time to train staff. You cannot put a number or cost or price. I'm replacing staff that's been here for 5 or 10 years with all that experience. So that has to be factored into the equation. I don't know how you do it. I don't know what the formula is. I know that it's costly. And it will cost the town, it will cost council, it will cost all of us at some point in time. So I trust our staff. I think that they know we're going to sit here as councillors and try to tell the staff out there what they need or what they don't need. I have to trust you guys to tell us this is what you need to get the job done for us. So I'm not an expert in planning, so I can't sit here and question Walter or anybody else as to why they need that person. They have to tell us that. So we have to trust you guys, and hopefully these numbers, and I'm behind you on this, that these numbers and these bodies are correct, and we need them going forward. You can probably do with more, because I know this was not the number you came up with. I think there was a higher number of staff that you actually need. So I still stand by this. So I trust you. I think you need what you say you need. I've seen it. I've seen how hard you work. I've seen the number of hours. I've seen you here at night. And you have families too. You know, I mean, so you're here with your families at home. We do this part-time, supposedly. But, so, I'm sorry, I have to endorse what you put forward, and I'm not going to back off on that. And I'm not the expert to tell you what you need. You need to tell us.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I've changed a little bit since I made my first comments. I'm inclined to agree more with Councillor Frake in the fact that staff have come together to look at what it is they need, and they've kind of collectively agreed that this is the best that they can put forward at this time. And they've already made decisions around things that they won't be putting forward. I think to look at this just in terms of salary is really very limiting, because what we're talking about here is service to the community. So I guess what I hear, like Councillor Bradzi, not to pick on you, but when you say what cost, how much does it cost to go to committees, this new committee structure? Well, what you're losing by not going to that committee structure is you're not getting community engagement anymore. You're not getting participation from experts in the committee to help advise the town. That's a huge loss. So this is money that's facilitating that community engagement. So I think we have to look beyond the salary, because the salary is really, these additional staff are really about how do we provide a better service to the community. So I think just focusing on the money or trying to kind of shave it down isn't necessarily the best approach. And I guess I'm inclined to think now that here's a package of people that we feel, or town has felt, staff collectively feel will help move the town forward. And I'm happy with what's being put forward. Thank you.
All right, maybe we can have Sarah comment. Thanks.
Well, good evening. So I'll keep it fairly brief. I don't want to take too much of your time, but one thing I do want to say, and I'm sure this is true for all of the positions, and it is certainly true for mine. When you look at the title Special Events Coordinator, it's really capacity building in the department. Because when we add in a special event coordinator, whatever role we have, I'm also alleviating some other pressures in other areas of my work where they can spend more time doing what they need to be doing. So for example, all of our staff right now do special events, every single one of us, including me. We all have a bit of a role in that. And so by adding this position, it allows more time to go into programming from some of our staff, more time to go into dedicating some time into our allocation policies and our allocation program, which we need to do as well. Advertising and sponsorship, again, is a bit of a shared responsibility. It creates more capacity for us to deliver on multiple things. So while it is called special events, please know it really is a community service capacity builder for our team. We're small, we're mighty, we all do a lot of things, and so it just creates way more resource for all of us to do all of these pieces. And maybe that's not really reflected specifically in this business case, but I think it's so important to how we are delivering our services and what gets provided by adding this resource. Just to be clear, so last year we did have a huge year, as was pointed out by one of our councillors, and many of you were there, which was wonderful. And I do want to note, we didn't just do that on the resources that we have in our base budget. We did have an operating project in our budget, which included materials and also included a substantial amount of staff. So we did add staff to be able to deliver that. And what we saw, we didn't just deliver one extra event, we delivered many. We saw more grants received than we've ever received before, which was just tremendous work by the whole team. And, the feedback we got with every single event was they just wanted more. The attendance exceeded what we expected every single time, and they just wanted more and more. And we really want to build on the momentum. We see the community impact that comes from these community events, and it could be the touch a truck for the little 2-year-old who's going and seeing the big plow truck that comes out for the day. It could be the Santa Claus parade. We want to continue the Arts Walk event, but it's also the small stuff like supporting Raptor Fest, who called me yesterday, and see how we can support some of those events and activities. the new Halloween event that we did this past year, which I think some of you went to. Again, kind of came up last minute. Our staff were nimble. They helped get it done. We just see all of these things, all of these opportunities to keep growing this, and we really see a demand from the community to see them happen. Our community has changed. I don't think it's changing. I think it has changed. We see a lot of newcomers coming, and we see so many new faces at these events as well, which is wonderful. And you get a chance to talk to them and interact with them and share information about what we're doing in our community. So the potential, I think, is really significant with this position, and we hope that you'll consider it. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Sharwell.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I could be on board if this is, this position has the sponsorship aspect in it, because I feel like there's a lot of money that we're losing in the recreation department. So if we could have this person also be responsible for sponsorship, then that could possibly recoup some of this. And also with the hockey, if that was something that we could possibly get fixed so that we're actually getting the payments that we should be getting from the town. If you can ensure that we would have that as part of this, then I would be on board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, through the mayor. So again, as I said before, I'm not going to say it's all baked into specifically this position, because that would be untruthful, but yes, that's creating capacity in that space. Sponsorship is definitely an area we want to go after more. But it's work to do that. You have to go out, you have to build the right relationship. It isn't just a one-time thing. So certainly part of this role will be going after sponsorship, and that could be in the space of events, but even in other areas too, where we think we can do a better job of some of our sponsorship. So it could be more than one person assisting with that, but this is creating that capacity. And definitely in the allocation side as well, whether it's all being this person, again, when you're a small team, you do have to share a bit of it, but it will create capacity in both of those spaces.
Can I just finish that, Councilor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jordan, thank you. Yeah, if we could, like, I'm not looking for like little tiny minuscule sponsorship. I mean, substantial sponsorship to possibly recoup this. And if there was, if we could make this like a 1 year, a temporary position just to see how it goes, then decide next year. That I would be most comfortable with that. I don't know if that's something we could amend to a 1 year term. It's temporary to see how it goes. A pilot.
Sarah, go ahead.
Through the mayor, I fully appreciate that ask. The one caution I would say is a lot of events and a lot of these activities, you should be planning them 6 and 9 months out. So a pilot for a year does get a little tricky depending on how you're doing it. If we're really, once you build some of those momentums, we have to know we have the capacity to continue them. That would be my one hesitation with that.
So, Korstanji.
Through you, Mayor. So, I don't like the title of the position. And that's what I think puts you off from it. Yeah, you should change it. But anyway, so if you can tell me that this position is going to bring services to residents that don't currently have recreational services, I can be okay with it. We're lacking in a lot of areas, special needs programming, low-income programming, things like that. So if this person can add to the community and bring more specialized programming and specialized services, and even within the special events, so it's a complement to what we have, but it's also providing what we don't have. I know that staff is stretched thin, and there's a lot of programming and it takes a lot of work, but there's also a big gap that we're missing, and I think if you can tell me that this person is going to fill that gap, then I can support it.
Through the mayor, this position may not be the one that fills in that gap entirely, but this position takes away some of the time that one of our other staff is spending, who does have a particular keen interest in doing that and is very keen to get more into doing that work, because we agree there is a gap. So again, I'm looking at this a bit as a team, but this will create the capacity absolutely to invest more in that. Our one staff is very interested in doing work in that. We've done a lot of work with Parasport, for example, new work that's just scratching the surface. We know that, but I think the potential and opportunity, and she has that keen interest, is there.
Okay, so freeing up the time of the other staff will provide, and I don't just mean programs for people with special needs, that's a need for sure, but you know, there's programs in Hamilton for lower income girls specifically. It's targeted groups, programs for mental health. That's what I would like to see to fill that gap, so.
Yeah. Through the mayor, I will just say one of the challenges we have too is our space, something that we know we're going to be fixing in the coming years and in a big way, which makes a difference, but definitely we think there are a lot of things that we can do in some of those areas. And just, you know, seeing as our community is changing, the people that are coming to our events as well as giving us a good tasting of who's in our community now and what are they wanting to do, and it is changing. It's not all just hockey programs, it is different programs. So I agree, it's kind of a broad spectrum that I think we can tap into.
Councillor DeVolk.
Mayor Jordan, my question may not necessarily be for Sarah, it may be for all the positions. So feel free to have anybody answer. But one of the things that the province is keen to see us do is to share services with other municipalities. And I sometimes think that we need to pursue that more, and maybe we can, I'll say, forestall that dreaded A word that we call amalgamation, right? So when I think of these positions now, and feel free to talk about any of the 6, is there any room with these positions to consider sharing the services in some way, shape, and form with our sister municipalities around us?
I don't know if you want me to answer that question. I do think that as a team, we do look at all of those things. And I think sometimes it could be a formal sharing, and sometimes it can be a simpler sharing. I guess I'm going to speak a little bit more on my level. And for me, sometimes it's also sharing with the community. Sometimes as well, by having somebody that can coordinate certain areas, for example, in our work, we can also, you know, leverage a partnership in the community to help deliver a service. I do think I would speak on behalf of every single one of my colleagues to say we're all very aware of the environment that we're in and looking at what sort of shared experiences we can get, where we're not just sharing a resource, but we're making sure we're getting the value that we need out of that for the community that we are serving as well. Maybe that's a little too vague, so feel free to ask for a more specific answer. I don't want to, but I think it is something that it's coming up so much more in our conversation. So I guess at least I will say, rest assured, it is not lost upon us that we need to be looking at that regularly.
And do we, for any of these positions, do we see any possibility of sharing anything with our surrounding municipalities? You know, if we're talking a full-time employee, could we be talking a half-time one? Perhaps, you know, the town of Lincoln or West Lincoln is looking for somebody in that same area. Is that, do we know of those things? Do we know what they're doing? Have we considered that?
Mm-hmm. I don't know, CAO, maybe you want to answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just generally speaking, I mean, we always review to see if we can do any kind of shared services, right? We've been working with Lincoln quite closely. I mean, even our director of planning, we're getting some support from them through a shared director. So I still don't think that solves our problem and the staff resources that we need, right? There can be aspects where it can be shared, but there's still some core functions that has to happen within Grimsby, right? For example, our governance, right? It's going to be Grimsby governance, right? I can't share that with Lincoln's governance, right? So stuff like that, I don't think we can look at it. We will look to see where other aspects of our services that can be collaborated on, but I still think that we do need to dedicate bodies to be able to do some of this work too, right?
So currently, we don't have a communications person at all, and we're moving up to one whole one, and I'm hoping that means time will be freed up from all of our senior staff. But I understand, for example, the town of Lincoln has something like 3 people in that area. is there any opportunity to leverage with them? Are there 3 people really busy? And so those are the sorts of questions I'm asking, and I don't think I need to belabor it, but I think you kind of get the gist of where I'm going with this, that, is there an opportunity to, perhaps not even hire a full person, or to contribute to theirs, and their team can have them as full-time employees, and then we can basically contract services from them, right? So just brainstorming on different ways to do it. Thank you.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Worship. Through you. This isn't for Ms. Sweeney, because I don't want to feel like I'm picking on one person. I'm generally opposed to all staff increases, so it's not you. I just want to, I want to go back to comments that were made about, we have experts in each department, and I agree with that. We have expert administrators in each department, but we're the ones who are tasked with making the hard decision. We're the ones who are accountable to taxpayers, and we're the ones who have to decide, we have to ask the question, is it something we need? Is it something we can afford? And if we don't do it, what's the negative impact? And if we do it, what's the positive impact? So what service increase will we see if we hire this person? Or what service decrease will we see if we don't? It needs to be justified by population growth. It needs to be justified by needs analysis. So with all due respect, we can't just take staff's word for it, because, if I'm the principal of a school and you ask me if I need more teachers, my answer is always going to be yes. But the government needs to decide how that's going to be funded. If I'm the chief of police and you ask me if I need more police officers, my answer is always going to be yes. But it's the government's job to budget that and decide how that budget's going to be allocated. If you ask, you can put this, if you ask a hospital administrator, do you need more doctors and nurses? They're going to say, yes, I need more doctors and nurses. So whether we agree that this staff is needed or not, we need to make a decision on whether this is a good use of taxpayers' money. And I still haven't seen the justification for it. So, as much as I want to say, yes, everybody you get a new staff member, I want to be Oprah and give everybody new staff members. But I honestly, and I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be flip about it, because this is people's jobs that we're talking about, and I want to be respectful of the people who do the jobs, and I am. But I have not seen a justification, really, for any of these new positions. And further to that, so we've gotten to the point now where we say that senior staff has brought these positions forward. And again, we weren't part of that discussion process. So we're only seeing 6 new positions, right? So you have to think of it from our perspective. 6 new jobs for the town of Grimsby in 1 year, which for me seems like a lot. We don't see what you whittled away. If 6 new jobs is what you came up with, what did you start off with? Because did you start off with 15? Did you start off, where did we begin to get down to 6? Because I'm concerned that we're massively understaffed if you whittled it down to only 6. Where did it begin? What positions did you think should come forward that didn't come forward this year? Because that might be something that might be an important thing for us to consider as well. We really wanted 3 positions in this department, but we've decided that this is the one that's the #1 priority for this year. But in the future, we think we also need this one, and this one. So, I'm trying not to be a negative Nelly. I hope you understand that I have a great deal of respect for staff. It's not a disrespect for staff that leads me to this position. I think every staff member knows my respect for them, and I hope that that's always come across clearly. And if it hasn't, then I apologize. But I still don't see the justification for all this new staff. Thank you.
All right, so where we're at here, the budget was organized in such a way where the staffing component was part of the overall number, the overall picture. Grimsby's, I think we can all agree, it's a great place to live, We want it to be even a better place to live. We saw that by our strategic priorities. And we feel that by going back to standing committees, that's another way where we're going to get more people involved in town, more bang for our buck through the committee system. Yes, it's going to take more work to get there. Yes, there's going to be growing pains for that, but it's, at the end of the day, I think everything on there is all, and I can say to a T, the staff is doing this to make Grimsby a better place, make this municipality a better place, function better. We're coming out of this pandemic. A lot of people did different things and spread themselves thin over the pandemic, and certainly during the Canada Summer Games in 2022, our 100th centennial, I know how hard rec services staff worked, Public Works worked, and everyone pulled together as a team, and I see that this budget here is something where it's all rolled together as a package, and I understand what you tried to do, Beth, with that, and I see that yes, there's a $400,000 increase in employees, but it's going to make this community better, and I think it will make it from one end to the other better. And I can see the bigger picture in this whole budget, and for that, I would support the staffing increase the way it is, and I would like to see if we have majority that would move that way, whether we can do a straw poll before we break. I think that may be the way to do it. Yeah, well, yeah.
Sorry?
Just call out the names.
Councillor Devoli?
I'm still confused as to what you're asking me to cast a straw on. To be in favor of that point as
Just
stated?
this point, yeah, so we can move on to point number 4.
I will
As it
say
states.
no, I would like to see it slightly reduced.
Councillor Frake? Councillor Frake?
Oh, there it is. Yes.
Councillor Howe?
Yes.
Councillor Vardy? Councillor Vardy? I think you're muted. Councillor Vardy?
Yes.
Councillor Charwa?
No.
Councillor Korstanji?
Yes.
Councillor Barretzi?
No.
Councillor DeFlavio?
No.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
So we do have a majority.
Why don't we take, how long? 20 or 15? 15? 15 to 20-minute break, and then we'll start with number 4. All right, we're ready to start back up. Now we're moving to number 4. 4. Go ahead, Beth.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. So recommendation number 4 is a business case for the grant funding program that was at the request of council for staff to bring forward a program and policy or outline document for a grant program. So what staff has recommended and is outlined in the business case, which is Appendix E of the report, is a pilot project for 2023 at a total amount of $100,000 funded from the council strategic priority reserve. So it doesn't have a direct impact on the levy, with the intention that staff will develop a program and bring that back to council, and then implement and report back on the program, what the success was, and what maybe some of the opportunities for improvement, and then make a decision as to whether council wants to maintain such program on a permanent basis, where we would put it on the tax levy, or if we want to discontinue the program. So it gives an opportunity for us to test the waters to see if that's really what we want to do and what the outcome of a program like this would be. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has on this. Yeah.
Councillor DeFlavio.
I know you wish that I would shut up, but so I'm going to try and keep it quick. The reason why this came forward was because of the request from McNally House Hospice for a one-time assistance, which was $132,000. So this wouldn't cover that. So I'm opposed to this for multiple reasons. I'm opposed to it because it doesn't cover what I wanted to fund in the first place, which was McNally House. I'm also opposed to it because I don't want to see an ongoing fund. The reason why I was in favor of the McNally House support in the first place was because it was something that I believed in, that one project. Having a fund like this means that we have to, that people can come forward and ask for funding every year. I know it's just a pilot for this year, but it means it's something we'll have to budget for. This year, it would be $100,000 out of the strategic priority funding. But if we continued it, it would be a budgeted item. I would prefer that, again, and I know that we voted against it, but I would prefer that we just voted in favor of funding McNally House Hospice and strike this line item completely and deal with each individual request as an individual request. You mentioned the surplus from last year. I can't remember what your exact number was that was being transferred to reserves. Yeah, right. So we have plenty of funds in the surplus to fund the $132,000, in my opinion, requested by McNally House Hospice. I would prefer that we funded that one-time request and struck this line item completely and just dealt with requests on a case-by-case basis based on the council of the time, rather than, I don't think it's necessary to have, and I guess my other question would be, have we explored other municipalities and how they deal with it? And so if I went to the city of Hamilton, well, let's go with an equally sized municipality like Lincoln or, West Gwillimbury, like something like those, those ones that are always in our comparator ones that I didn't know existed until we started getting those comparator ones. What do they do when they get a funding request? Do they have it in their budget, or is it, because maybe we were doing it wrong for all these years. If it's something that other councils have in their line items, maybe we got it wrong, but I would prefer not to have it as an ongoing budgetary item, personally.
Is there any other questions on that?
Councillor DeVoley.
I would like to start by saying that my initial reasons for deferring it were really based upon two reasons, both of which had nothing to do with the particular entity, the organization that came to us. My first reason was that I felt that we did not have a good understanding of our finances back in January, that we did not understand at that point in time, being new councillors, what was ahead, what were the projects that were going to be coming down the road and so on. And I think it's always dangerous to make one-off decisions when you don't have a really good grasp of where you are at financially, nor what is coming ahead of you as well. Now that we've gone through this budget process, including all those great orientation sessions, we have a much deeper understanding now of our town and how we do things, including of our budget, our operating budget, our forecasts even that have been provided to us 5 and 10 years out. So I will say that was my first reason for asking it to be deferred until we got to the budget process, so that when we make decisions like this, we are doing so from a much more knowledgeable base. My second reason, though, for asking to have it deferred and asking to have referring it back to staff and having a policy is because I believe that we need an open and fair process so that we can consider any and all requests that come in at one time, and that we can then incorporate it into the budget. I don't think it's good financial planning ever to pass a budget and then take one-offs as they arise hither and thither throughout the year. That is not a good way to actually do things. And so by having a policy like this, having a process, we basically are approving this and incorporating it as part of our budget, knowing full well at this point in time what the impact is. At the same time, I think what has happened in the past is that we have approved many of these requests, but we have never asked for reporting back from the entities as to how it has been spent. In fact, I'm not even sure we have a really good handle on what we have approved and how much over the years, because they happen as one-offs, right? And so this process, this policy that will be fleshed out further into a more detailed process, will give us those reporting requirements back too. I feel that in this position, if we're taking residents' money and deciding who we're going to give it to as charities and not-for-profit organizations, that we need to make sure that we understand where it's being spent and have reporting back to us, just the same as we require from all our staff and our department heads too. So at this point in time, I feel like we have met my first objective, which was to have a much better understanding of our finances. The second objective, which was to have a more open and fair process to apply for these things, we have now met if we approve this policy and go forward. I do share my fellow councillors' concern about the size of the dollars and about it becoming recurring. But I will say this, I am willing to be in this neighborhood of a dollar value, because what we want to do is have entities, organizations apply, work through the process, and learn from what that is all about. And if we reduce the value down to the amount of only one organization, we will not learn from that. You literally need multiple ones, multiple examples before you actually learn about whether our process is good, where it needs to be tweaked, refined, and so on. And so for this year, I am willing to let that amount be higher. But I do agree that going forward, I would not like to see it at this amount. We're taking it out of the reserve this year, so it has no impact on our taxpayers. It's been accumulated from prior years and landed up in this reserve. But going forward, there is a very real possibility that even if we reduce the amount, it would have an impact on our levy. And so, by and large, my philosophy and my approach to this is that I think it should be smaller going forward. I would like to suggest that at that point in time, we consider doing what previous councils have done. And what previous ones did, and some of my fellow councillors will remember some of this, but the councillors who sit on Grimsby Power and Niagara Power don't get paid director's fees. That's only paid to the third-party directors. But a calculation is still done of what they would have received but didn't, and those amounts are then given to the town. And traditionally, that has not been budgeted for as revenue, but traditionally, council then use that as an amount to give out to organizations. And I will say that, from my understanding of history, that amount is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000. I'm not saying that's where we'll land going forward, but I'm saying that that amount will go, you know, even if going forward, let's say we set the amount at 40,000 to use a number, you know, 25 of that is coming by virtue of the fact that fellow councillors are not being paid to sit on these boards, and perhaps the impact on the levy is only, you know, 15,000 at that point in time. So I will just wrap this up by saying that certainly, you know, heard from supporters of the charities that approached us. We've heard from other charities, neighbors, seniors on fixed income, you name it. We did hear from a lot of these parties. But at this point in time, I would suggest that, you know, I would be in favor of supporting this policy and working through it as a pilot program for the next year to learn from it, and then hopefully reduce the amount going forward.
I would be happy to add up to, and then rather than like up to 100,000 if we don't have requests or if no one's approved, and then you would roll it into almost a reserve fund like we do other things. But it doesn't have to be 100. I'm not beholden to the 100,000. So, Councillor Frake first, and then.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I'm in the middle here somewhere. I tend to agree with Councillor DeFlavio. I still want to see McNally House come good. I think that, but I don't think that was one lump sum, was it, Beth? It was over a period of time, wasn't it?
Through the mayor, they were asking for an amount, $33,000 over 4 years, so
Over
total
4
of-
years, so it wasn't 100, it wasn't one lump sum. So we could do that over a period of years, but I guess we would have to pass through the budget each year for 4 years. Is that what we would have to do?
Through the mayor, just because I think that this is an important part of the discussion. Right now, if we have $100,000 approved in a pilot project, that's only one time in nature. So if we were to do an annual commitment, we really could only commit to 2023, just to the 1 year.
Okay.
At this point in time.
Yeah, I understand it as a pilot project. So if we put it at $100,000, I don't, you know, in the last 6 months, I must have gotten at least 4 or 5 emails from different charities asking me to represent them on council, which I never do. Of course I can't, and I don't. And I don't even pass it along because I'm sure everyone else around here probably gets similar requests as well. But I mean, once you run out of $100,000, the next charity comes along, what do you do? It might be the one you want to really give something to more than the other ones you gave to earlier. So it's a difficult one. I know it's a pilot, but it's like, how far is up? Kind of. So I'll go along with that as a pilot project this year. But I still think we owe McNally House some money. So I'll leave it at that. But it's a tough one, and I don't know what other municipalities do. So, and I don't know whether they are right or if they do something different, doesn't mean they're right. They could be wrong. Maybe we're right. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. I think we just go along with this pilot this time around.
Councillor Korstanji, then Sherwa, then Vardy.
Through you, Chair. I think this is perfect. This follows in suit with a lot of the other surrounding areas around us, City of Hamilton. There were a few others that have similar programs. This is actually better than I think what they have. This is the middle ground for everybody. It sets a fair and equitable criteria. It protects us legally, and it enables us to support McNally House. And we can reevaluate it. I agree with the up to. I think that's perfect. The surplus can then go back into next year if we decide to do it next year. I think this satisfies everybody, especially the taxpayer, because it's not on the levy this year. So I fully support this. I think it's a job well done. Thank you.
Councillor Sherrill.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. I agree with everything Councillor Korstanji said, and I thank Councillor DeVoli for getting us to this point, because she was the one that insisted on the criteria. She was the one that actually went and spoke with the mayor of North Bay to get this idea for 100,000. I think it's great. I think it's a middle ground. And at this point, because we know where our money is and we're doing things the way we should be doing, now I'm more comfortable saying, okay, to the 33,000. I would prefer it to be a one-time every year. It makes it equitable. If other organizations want to come forward, then that's their opportunity as well, and we can do that. But if we go along with this, then I would support the 33,000 right now for this year.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in complete agreement with Councillors DeVoli and Korstanji. We need a process in place. It can't be first past the post, and we can't be spending money that hasn't been budgeted for, particularly when we have the opportunity to budget for these kinds of things. And this allows fairness and transparency. And it also, I think we all know in our hearts, I don't think there's anybody on council that doesn't want to give the money to McNally House. And I think this provides a framework for us to be able to do so. And, we'll be able to look at, because, like the week after McNally, Passtones came forward. So there will always be asks, and doing it first past the post or doing them one-offs is just, it's not good management. So I'm completely in favor of this. I agree with the up to 100, and maybe we can evaluate each year based on, what's available in the reserves. So I'm all in favor of this, and thank Beth and her crew for putting this together. Thank you.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thanks, Your Worship. Whatever we decide on this item, and I'm fine with having the criteria in place. As I've expressed before, excuse me, my concern is that it's an ongoing budget item, and once we budget for it, while I appreciate your idea of putting in reserves, it means we're taking taxpayers' money for something that we don't really know what it's going to be spent for and don't really know that it's needed. I can't think of any time in the past, other than the hospital and McNally House, excuse me, I'm sorry, where we've actually given money in these cases. So by budgeting for it, it means we have to start listening to requests. And I'm going to say no to pretty much all future requests. So I could tell you, I would prefer not to budget for it. What I would like to see happen, Your Worship, is I would like to see the funding of McNally House Hospice as a separate item out of reserves this year. So I am going to make a motion that we add that as a number 10, or in addition to number 4. So, and that the funding for McNally House Hospice be taken out of the reserves for this year, just so we can get that out of the way, and we can reaffirm our support for McNally House. I do want to point out that we do support other organizations. We don't often have to do it through money, but we do it through money. We have the fort in the Carnegie Building, which I can assure you is not paying anywhere near the cost of that space. We have the Grimsby Historical Society and Archive that's also in the Carnegie Building, which is not paying anywhere near the cost of that space. These are all Grimsby organizations that we already help to fund. We do it all over the place. What we don't do with the McNally House is own the building, and I'm happy that we don't. I'd rather give them $132,000 for something they're spending $10 million on and not have anything to do with it anymore. So it's a great thing for the community, and I don't want to argue over the merits of it because I think everybody understands it. But I do want to make sure that it is funded this year out of the reserves. So if people are okay with that, or if I have a seconder to make that amendment, I would appreciate having that added to that, Your Worship. Thank you. And I think Councillor Howe was willing to second that if that was something that we could get up there.
We'll add it, but we won't.
Yeah, just a point of clarification on that. Because it's a funding ask over 4 years, so it's split out over 4 years, the same way the region did it as well. So really paying the full amount this year doesn't make full sense, in my opinion, so.
Just further to that, Your Worship, we might not pay it all this year, but we can say that $132,000 be allocated from the reserves. No? Then let's pay it all this year, because I just want to get it out of the way. And it's not like the money's going to, if we're funding it, we're funding it. And if we're not, we're not. So it's coming out of reserves. Anyway, maybe our finance department has something to say about it.
Through the mayor. That's what I was kind of speaking to, that the pilot, just because it's a one-year pilot project, to commit $32,000 a year would be pre-approving a future year's budget, which you can't do. So it is all or nothing. Or if you want to approve it, then you have to add $32,000 to the base budget. And then we would send it to them every year, but you would have to put it on the base budget.
So through you, Your Worship, we couldn't just approve the amount?
Through the mayor, you could approve the amount. That's been the previous discussion, that we would fund that through a reserve on a one-time basis. That's always within your toolbox.
Councillor Howe.
And I second it, Councillor DeFlavio's motion. And the fact is, yeah, we could spread it out over 4 years, but what we're going to make an interest on $132,000 in 4 years, and it depreciate or steps down by 25% each time. We're not going to make any money, because then you got to cut a check, 3 different checks, and it doesn't cost, we don't do a check for $4.19 or anything. So might as well just have it done and out of the way.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through your Mayor Jordan, thank you. I find this adding this after the fact separately is a bit hypocritical, because here you're saying, I'm not going to give any money to any organization except this organization. So you're taking that whole equitable component out of it, and you're saying you're being the one that decides this is the only worthy charity. So I'm going to be a complete firm no on that. So you can pick 33,000, you can pick 130,000, whatever. I'm going to be a no. But if we go ahead with this, I'm okay with 33,000, and then this is this year, and then next year's another year. So you can take it or leave it.
Mr. Mayor, can we ask a question?
Well, just moving forward, if we try to move forward with funding the whole, that's a reconsideration.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I'm just pulling that up right now.
January 6th.
I'm seeing January, no?
They came in January, but
A question for Ms. Sweeney, through you, Your Worship. How much do we have currently allocated within our our Culture and Recreation Department budget for requests from charitable organizations? Like for organizations within the community. It used to be $10,000. I don't know what that is now. I just want to point out the fact that we have other methods for organizations to come forward and request funding. This is not the only way that organizations could get funded.
Through you, Mayor, so we do have the community grants program, which I think is what you're referring to. It is now a $20,000 program that we do annually, but it really is meant, and it's sort of specified to be about building community capacity. So it has limits of, I think it's either $2,500 or $3,000 per award. So it is it's really intended to be a starter for like, programming initiatives, all those types of things. Thank you. Yeah.
Just to clarify through you, Mr. Mayor, so at the February 6th council meeting, there was a motion to fund the McNally Hospice for the full amount of $132,000, and it was defeated. So if we want to bring this back, it is a reconsideration and it requires 2/3, and it has to be brought forward by one of the councillors that voted no, which was Councillor DeVoli, Councillor Howe, Councillor Vardy, Councillor Sherwal, or Councillor Korstanji.
Councillor Korsanji, you've had your hand up for a long time, so.
Through you, Chair. What concerns me about this is, we can sit here and make a decision, but doing a one-off with such a substantial amount of money and then forcing other charities to go through a criteria that we created for this charity to go through so that we had a fair and equitable process, I think unless we had a legal opinion on doing that, or at least a consultation, is a very slippery slope. This is going to open us up to, when you have other charities and you have marginalized demographics of those charities, if they're not treated the same and they can prove a history of not being treated the same, which some very well can, you have a human rights case, which is very expensive. And we need to look at this, not just we want to fund this and we want to fund this, but we have to look at a fair and equitable process for everybody to follow. We can't say you have to follow it and you don't, because I believe in this, but you can go through this pathway or something. It needs to be fair across the board. This, to me, is a fair process, and it's not like everybody's going to get stuff because they still have to follow the criteria. McNally would fall under this and they would still get funded. It's a win-win, in my opinion, and it doesn't leave us susceptible to human rights cases and other legal issues.
Yes, are we satisfied with the pilot project?
Can you move on to the vote?
Well, no, we don't need to vote. I don't think we have, we don't have a seconder for Councillor Howe's reconsideration. So now we're going back to number 5, and is there any further debate on number 5?
I have my hand up, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Counselor Vardy.
No, I just want to say that the motion that Councillor DeFavio puts forward completely sort of negates the whole reason why we wanted to put a fair and transparent process in place. And I'm very supportive of McNally. I think it has to go through a fair and transparent process. We have an obligation to the community to do that. So thank you.
So now we're moving on to number 5, 2023 wastewater gross operating budget. Beth?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this recommendation is for our gross wastewater operating costs to the tune of 6.7 million and a levy of 4.3 million or 4.4 million. So this ask aligns with what was presented to committee on March 6th, whereby we will be charging or recovering the wastewater budget through the tax levy for 2/3 of the year, as this is a transition year as we move to 50% on the levy and 50% on the rate. So the difference between the 6.7 and the 4.4 would be collected by the town through the rate budget, which we're setting at 1.23, and that's the rates. The rates outlined in Appendix B provides that information. So it is in alignment with what you saw at committee on the 6th, but happy to answer any questions.
Counselor DeFlavio.
I know this is going to come as a shock. So I'm just trying to understand that line, the wastewater operating levy. So I'm looking at the chart that was on page 2. This is what I was talking about before because I jumped ahead. That shows 2023 as 4.3 million, and you mentioned that it's going to be funded. The difference is going to be funded through the water rate, the new rate. So there's a 1.86 reduction in the levy this year. What is that as a percentage of the overall levy?
It should be roughly 33.3%.
Of the overall levy?
Oh, of the overall.
Yes. That's, so it's, if it's one, so it's like 12%?
15.5 million. Sorry, gosh. So 1.8 divided by
12%?
15.5, 12%, yep.
Okay, so when we say it's a 6% increase in the taxes, or 3.9%, whatever number you want to use, that's on top of the 12% that's been reduced. Because well, you're nodding no, but listen to my reasoning as to why, okay? Because that money's still going to be collected in the wastewater rate. So that, it's not like that's coming off the taxes. That's just being moved to a different category. Okay, so if 12% is being reduced from the levy, but the overall tax increase is still 6%, that's an 18% tax increase, isn't it? Tell me, explain to me where my math is wrong. Maybe I'm completely misunderstanding, but what I said before was when we added this to the water rate, we needed to make sure that we took that off of the levy and started from that as a tax increase, because it's not like people are getting a tax decrease there. That's going to a different place. They're going to be paying that somewhere else. It's not like they're not going to be paying it anymore. So it's just a different kind of taxing. So explain to me why I'm wrong. Maybe if I'm completely misunderstanding, then I'll acknowledge that. I apologize.
Through the mayor, I think the important concept here is that the tax levy and the wastewater levy are two different levies, and they show up on your bill in two different ways. So you're right, the taxpayer is going to see apples to apples, like from last year to this year, they're going to see that large decrease on their wastewater levy equal to that. because we're going to charge them for it on their water bill when we start implementing the wastewater rate. But I want to be clear that we did not net that 12% decrease off the tax levy. Two separate things.
Okay, so that's, thank you for clarifying that. I just, because that was my concern, was that, it's, because I know it's a different line on the tax bill, but I want to make sure that we're not, the explanation that I gave before was when we had the debenture for the library and the debenture for the Peach King Center, and it came off of the levy, it would have been dishonest for us to say that it was a 1% tax increase if it was an 11% tax increase, because we knocked all of that off of the, we weren't paying that anymore. So I just want to make sure that that is actually what's happening. It's just moving from this item over to that, and we're not increasing revenue by that amount. Okay.
Just to add through the mayor, there's very strict rules around keeping levy and the rate program separate. So two different things. On the tax example of the tax bill on the presentation, you can see that on the slide that the percentage is, it's a different percentage for the wastewater levy, and it wasn't part of the overall. Well, we blended them. It actually reduced it a bit because our wastewater levy, if you restated 2022 for the same methodology as 2023, that's where I was showing the increase, because I don't want to show. The reality is they're going to see a decrease on their tax bill on that wastewater levy, a large one. And so you're going to get questions about that. What's going on? When they say, don't worry, we're going to charge you on your water bill.
Through you, Your Worship, if I could, that's what I wanted to clarify. So the overall tax bill, the tax bill should actually decrease. But to clarify, it's not a decrease, it's just we're collecting it in a different area. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that people were understanding that. Thank you.
So, and just a further addition, this actually is us being compliant and being the same as the other 443 municipalities, because we were the only one in Ontario that was doing it this way, right? So, okay.
If I could, Your Worship, I've been critical of the old way for many years, so I'm happy that we're going to one where people are actually paying for what they use. It's just, I want to make sure that it's clear to people why things are happening the way they are. Thanks.
All right, so it looks like number 5 is good now with everyone. No further questions, so let's move on to number 6.
So again, the water operating budget, gross expenditure of 7.9, and that will be collected on the rate budget. And again, the rates are outlined in Appendix B, and they were increased at 4%. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, no questions on the water, so now let's move to number 7, downtown improvement area.
So number 7 is our downtown improvement area, or DIA. They're leaving their levy budget at $87,350. That hasn't increased from the previous year. And just to clarify that this amount would only be taxed to those that are part of the DIA. They would see a separate line item on their bill. So this is just directly for the DIA, and it is approved by the DIA. So we're bringing that forward to council for approval.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thanks, Your Worship, through you. So it's based on assessment, just like any other, and so we talked last night about a BIA for the Grimsby on the Lake area. If that ever came to fruition, it would be similar to this. It would be funded through a levy on the taxes, and it would be, and this is a good indication of what it costs. So there are no town of Grimsby dollars spent on the DIA. Is that correct? It's all funded through a levy, and so that would be similarly what would happen in a BIA for Grimsby on the Lake. So that would be part of what we'd have to. In order to approve that, they'd need to understand that there would be an additional cost to the people who own commercial properties there. Thanks.
Councillor Frake.
I don't think that's exactly true, is it? I mean, it's the BIA or DIA is formed. They produce a budget, and that budget it's kind of like going backwards, isn't it? That budget then is you take that budget and you go back to the members of the DIA, and that's the number you use to extract taxes from those people. It's not I don't think it's the way you think it is. The DIA puts the budget together, what they think they need for the year, and then they submit that to you, and you collect it from the members of the DIA. Is that the way it works? That's the way I think it works. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor DeVoe.
Okay, the accountant has to clarify that a bit, though. You don't collect it from the members, you collect it from the property owners, because many of the businesses there are tenants, they're not property owners. Whether the businesses ultimately bear the cost or not depends upon how their lease is structured. So all we can say is we have a defined area, we know the properties that are in the defined area, we know the assessment value of those properties in the defined area. $87,350 is divided by that and levied on the property owners in that area. And it's up to them if they're passing it along, I guess, to the actual tenants themselves, right?
All right, no further questions on that. Number 8.
All right, number 8. This is our 2023 capital budget ask. It's there's an overview in Appendix C, and I had mentioned the pages, I can't think of them off the top of my head, that are in the budget book, but there should be a detailed business case supporting each one of those asks. We are asking only for 51.8 million, given that 361 million was approved in late in 2022 through FIN 22-2028. So there isn't a decision point around the 361.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. I would like to discuss this, specifically the town hall modernization. I've spoken about this before, and I've become a little bit more okay with it because I do recognize the fact that we are growing, and that I have seen staff really using the breakout rooms, and I recognize that, but I'm hoping we can get that number down. So I don't know if Brandon can speak to that, or you, Beth, or?
Through the mayor, yes, I would ask that Director Wortman come up and speak to that project.
Good evening. Thank you for asking that question. So I know we had discussed with council with our Public Works workshop this project, and in particular the town hall modernization. We took away some of the comments that we heard and looked how we could tighten up the project scope, and the effort there was to gain some cost efficiencies. So just kind of walk you through how what we've done and kind of the numbers that we're coming up with now. So in the current budget, and Beth, smack me if I've said anything wrong. So the current budget, we proposed a certain option was that included reducing the private office sizes and adding 61 workstations. It was roughly $800,000. In the 2023 budget, as presented to you tonight, there was that net cost after you took out the 350 that was approved in previous years was $502,500. We were also asked to consider including improvements to the council area as part of the work. So this is the council chambers area. These improvements were contemplated after basically the budget cutoff date. So we're anticipating that we need to come back to council post-budget to cover this additional work. So with the total cost of, the staff area and the council chambers, it came to a total of $890,000. So what I'm saying is the 2023 post-budget ask would have been $592,500. The new option we've considered is removing the downsizing of the private offices. So this will remove a considerable cost to the project, and added benefit is will be less impactful in that it doesn't involve construction of any walls. So we're not tearing down any walls, and we don't have to remove the glass wall fronts that are in front of the offices right now. So under the revised proposal, the total project cost is roughly 740,000. Not roughly, is. So the 23 budget, this would be current budget ask, would be 442,000. So essentially, we're seeing efficiencies of 150,000. And what's important to note here is we're able to do the council chambers improvements as well as a revised staff area improvements at a savings of $150,000.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Frigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Councillor Vardy, are the chairs included?
Yes, the chairs are included.
Are you still up there, Councillor Vardy?
Councillor DeVos.
Yes, I am, and thank you. I'm going to need a good chair.
Mayor Jordan, my question doesn't have to do with this project so specifically, but it's still a question. When we start the renovations of the Peach King Center, I am envisioning that our recreation, parks, and culture staff are going to be severely displaced. And so what are the plans as to where they're going to go to?
Sorry, was that the question for the Community Services Director?
Sure.
Okay. I'm sorry, I misheard.
I didn't know
I
if
was
this-
counting, we were doing numbers in the background, so
I didn't know
that
if
was a
this has
question for
some
me.
impact on your numbers
Okay.
because,
I
the
can speak-
projects kind of go back to back, right?
I can speak to what we're going to do and sorry.
You are correct. We will be a bit displaced in having to sort that out. We'll have to have some staff have a presence there because the intention is to keep the arena open the whole time, which is really a big deal for us, and it's really going to cause a bit of a construction challenge, but we have to. 2 years of no ice, or a year and a half, I should say, isn't an option for us. So there will be a few in the staff area. We do have that outside storage area that our staff still occupy, so we'll be shifting a bunch of them there. But we will be finding spaces here and there, maybe even leveraging a bit of hybrid still and trying to make it work because it is going to be a bit of a challenge. So we'll be using a variety of spaces, some touchdown spaces here potentially too, perhaps even myself a bit more, just trying to make it work as best we can and fit people where we can.
So I guess the second part of the question then is if that is taking place, my question now is to Mr. Wortman. So, would it help if we then downsized the director's offices and had more space in the main part of the office to try and make the renovations, the staff displacement a little more efficient?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the way, as we can look at it, is a very good, excellent point about two competing but beneficial projects. Is I'm sure we can look at ways of how we can accommodate community services within our building, and hopefully if the timing lines up, we may have some additional spaces that we can support them in that. So as part of the new design, there are touchdown spaces, and our intent was to be able to accommodate staff from other facilities to come into the town hall and have a touchdown, we call them. But in terms of your question about if we reduce the office sizes, so I was working on the plans as early as, or as late as, this morning, and I think what I feel comfortable is we can accommodate our current design, the design which was, we can accommodate the same amount of workstations regardless of whether or not we downsize the private office is probably the safest way to say
okay.
it. So,
That definitely makes me feel better about you being able to do that. Though I have to say that the message of downsizing the offices for our senior staff is a powerful message to the rest of the staff that we really do care about where they sit and the amount of light they get and so on. Just an aside to that too, and other councillors have mentioned this to me too, when we all get our coats at the end of the night, we always comment about the space behind the council chambers, and I've often said it feels a bit wasted just holding our coats. Maybe there's room for some office space when our Parks and Rec staff are displaced. Maybe there's room here even behind the council chambers as an idea. But that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, that space is actually accessible access for the stage, if you want to call it. And actually, I would say that it is a bit of a, what do you call it, hidden gem, that from time to time you'll see staff come out here and hide, for lack of a better word. It's nice and sunny, have a book, and there's so on their breaks they can come out and enjoy that space with some peace and quiet at times. So I'm sure if push came to shove, we could fit some staff in there if we had to.
So now I know where to find you.
Exactly.
All right, seeing no further questions on number 8. No, we're, okay, go ahead, Beth.
Through the mayor, just a technicality, we're going to send through, those numbers will need to be revised in that recommendation, so we'll, and Chaz that, then, yeah.
All right, number 9. Yes.
So through the mayor, number 9 is more of a housekeeping, but we prepare the bylaws and we'll bring those back to April 3rd, so we'll have another opportunity to, or we'll ratify the budget on the 3rd officially, but I think now we need to go back up to number 1.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, hold on.
Through the mayor. So we've come full circle. We've done all the other recommendations. This is the base budget impact. So we're recommending to increase our levy of $512,890, and that's net of our assessment growth and the transit upload of $250,000. Does anybody have any questions about this number? Any concerns with this number? Happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Councillor DeVoley.
I really promised our treasurer that when we were looking at the budget the first time that, I would try and stay out of the weeds. But I do confess eventually, we dive down into the weeds. But I will say this, that it's a long document, right? 274 pages plus. And I think one of the things that I tried to keep in mind while I was looking at it is that our expenditures are primarily made up of 3 categories, namely our wages, our staff, our wages that they are paid, wages and benefits, our capital expenditures, and our transfers to reserves. And I would like to just sort of briefly talk about that because it's a really big number still, and we've sort of talked about it, but not really. And so I will say that, we've talked about capital and voiced our opinions on that. We've, the reserves, though, and we talked about the increase to the reserves. And I want to say that the entire concept of depreciation or amortization is about the amount we need to set aside every year in order to be able to replace these assets when they are due to be replaced. And our amortization number has traditionally been around 6.97 million, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so I was so happy to see that our transfer to reserves this year is about $6.5 million. And 6.9 even. Thank you for that correct number. And so that to me tells me that we are setting aside enough this year. Doesn't it means we have to stay on track for the coming years in order to actually save enough so that when the time comes, we have enough to replace those assets. And even then, that's not enough to replace the assets because we're saving based upon historical costs, not based upon future costs. And we know those can change quite rapidly, especially in times of inflation. But I was really happy to see that third number being so very, very close to the benchmark of what I think we need to set aside. We talk about the capital, and so now we come down to, the operating expenses, which is what this category is. And so just a few questions related to that. In amongst all of this, we talked about the debt costs for the Peach King Center starting in 2023. But are we planning to go out and borrow in 2023 with debt costs, or from a cash perspective, will it be 2024?
Through the mayor. So what we're doing is similar to the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. We're budgeting on the base $132,000, and we will put that into a reserve. And then we will build up the reserve over the next few years. We will then use the money that we've accumulated in the reserve, use that to as a funding source, and hopefully reduce the amount of debt that we need to go out and issue. And then we transfer the budget line item as a transfer to reserve. We change that budget line item to our debt payment. And so we're ensuring that we're committing the base dollars that are required to fund that debt on a long-term basis.
Thank you. That helps a lot, actually, and I do like that concept. My second question has to do with something you and I had talked about earlier, and that was about the fact that we currently don't have anything in our budget for the director fees in lieu that we collect from GPI and NPI, something in the neighborhood of $25,000. Were you thinking that you would put that in? I mean, it's hardly material at this point, but were you thinking you would add it in if we're going to make any amendments to it?
Through the mayor, that's certainly something that we could do. We could add that to the budget and reduce the levy ask by that.
Councillor Sharwell.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. I just want to say thank you because I had a ton of questions, and I would have to say all of staff have been fabulous with, I'd ask a question and they'd be so thorough with the answer. And, as a new councillor, you're concerned that this is the first budget, right? It's a scary thing. But you and Angela actually both showed me this is where we are, and it's going to keep improving. So it puts me at ease knowing that we have the right team as a whole on council. So thank you. It was a good process. Lots of questions, though. I'll try to ask less next year. Okay.
Just another housekeeping issue. I think if that is the desire of council to increase the budget for that revenue, it would reduce the levy budget by $25,000. So that 16,087,870, reduce that by 25,000. I'll have Ange do the numbers and send it. For recommendation number 1, we need just to quickly update those numbers on the fly.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So looking at number 1 then, so the two items the original report that you had the 3.9% versus 6%, I think it was, and then, so the actual increase this year on Grimsby taxpayers is 2.29% on the Grimsby budget. Is that correct? On the net, sorry, go ahead.
I'm jumping the gun.
No.
I just love it so much. I want to tell you all the numbers.
No, please.
I dream about these numbers. So what you need to do, just for transparency, the 2.29 that we've disclosed there, if you add back the 1.61 in the transit upload, that's your 3.9 that we were talking about on the base. So it's 2.29 plus the 2.8 that we approved for the 6 staff and the 1.6 for the levy. So what's that? I'll get my calculator. 2.29 plus the 2.8.
It's 5.7.
Plus the 1.6. And so it's
7.3.
6.75. And then, what am I doing? Well, no, capital through the mayor isn't on the levy.
Those numbers that you just gave us add up to 7.3.
No, they don't. Then
said
I said them wrong.
Okay.
I've done this so many times. 6.7.
Okay.
And then how we get to 6% is because the wastewater levy is only, if I restate 2022, is only increasing by 4%. So it's a blended impact on the levy between the wastewater levy and the tax levy of 6%. So then if we decrease this roughly by 25%, I think $30,000 reduced us to 5.95, so we're going to be close around there, 5.96%.
Through you, Your Worship. So the assessment growth of 1%, is that based on what we know for sure, or is that a prediction?
Through the mayor, the assessment growth is what's provided on the roll at MPAC at the end of the year.
Okay, so it's based on last year's numbers. Okay. So there could be more growth throughout the year, and that would be,
Through the mayor, we budget for that supplemental tax revenue, and we do budget for that in year, anything that we would capture. So if we do have more growth than that can drive a surplus, or it can drive a deficit, and then those supplemental properties that are added in year, then they show up on the roll the following year.
yeah, that really depends on when construction's completed and when assessment's completed, all that stuff. Okay, so I want to thank you too. I'm still not going to vote in favor of it, but I do, I genuinely do want to thank you. I can't vote in favor of the staffing increases. I appreciate, so I mean, if other people vote in favor of it, that's fine. I accept that I lose, but I really feel like we could make, so if the staffing increase is 2.8, without the staffing increase, the overall increase would be 3.2, which is another way of looking at it. It would be, basically, the tax increase would be half with no staffing increase. So that's the way that I look at it, and, yeah, so, but thank you to everybody for your work, and I love all of you. So please don't take it personally.
I know, through the mayor, it's actually, just before we came in here tonight, we were talking about the, now that, because we're on the tail end of the other local municipalities approving their budget, and so our actual gross increase is right in the middle of the average of, there was half higher and half lower than us, so we fared pretty well.
I did ask earlier about if we had the staffing numbers. I don't know if you were able to find that number or not, but I asked for how many new staff, not replacement staff or anything like that, how many new staff we've hired over the last 5 years. I don't know if you were able to get that number. If you could, I'd love to hear that number just so we get an idea. Because I see a bunch of them in this room.
Through the mayor, we did go back and look. So 2019, we had 116 permanent, this is just permanent full-time staff. And 2020, we jumped to 120 and then 121 in 2021. We dropped down in 2022 because I think we found something that we were not capturing correctly. And then we are actually only at 124 permanent FTE, so we're actually only increasing 4 over last year because we found another issue with an FTE. We were at 120, we bumped, that should have been 119 last year. And then I actually had a permanent full-time staff in finance that we split into 2 part-time. So we're down to, we're at 124. So since 2019, we've increased 8.
So just further to that, given the fact that from 2019 to now, we can say in almost every way the world's changed. And the fact is, in 2018, we didn't have even any cameras in this building, other than the Cogeco camera that was here. And you could see it on Tuesday afternoon at 2 if you were lucky. So now we have council meetings, and we'll have committee meetings, and we'll have standing committee meetings that will be accessible to everyone, and everyone can walk themselves back through it and watch it whenever they want. And I just really hope that they're all shorter. And with that, I have the budget, and I just want to thank everyone involved in it. I'm really happy with it and proud of it, and I think it will do a lot to help Grimsby. And that 2.8%, in my opinion, is great value for money, and I think our senior staff will prove that. So, moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that report FIN 2312, 2023 consolidated budget report dated March 21st, 2023 be received, and that the 2023 levy budget outlined in Appendix A with operating expenditures of $28,634,930 and a net levy of $16,062,870, increase of $487,890 or 2.13% over 2022 net levy be approved, which includes A, Niagara Regional Transit upload to region of $250,000 or 1.61%, assessment growth of 1%, that the 2023 levy include increased legal fees of $250,000 or 1.6% over the 2022 levy in support of responsible development be approved, and that an increase of $431,853 or 2.8% over the 2022 levy be approved in support to support staffing requirements, 6 permanent full-time staff, and program-related costs as outlined in the report, and funded from the Council Strategic Reserve, Appendix E. And that the 2023 wastewater gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $6,781,820 and a levy of $4,371,220, and the wastewater rates outlined in Appendix B be approved, and that the 2023 water gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $7,906,100 and the water rates outlined in Appendix B be approved, and that the 2023 downtown improvement area gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $87,350 and a levy of $87,350 be approved, and that the incremental 2023 capital budget ask outlined in Appendix C in the amount of $51,743,740 be approved. $52,104,740 less $361,000 approved through FIN 22-28, and that staff be directed to prepare the necessary 2023 budget, water rate, and wastewater rate bylaws for approval at the April 3rd, 2023 council meeting. Recorded vote.
Councillor DeVoley?
Yes.
Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Councillor Howe?
Yes.
Councillor Vardy?
Yes.
Councillor Charwa?
Yes.
Councillor Korstanji?
Yes.
Councillor Bradzi?
Yes.
Councillor DeFlavio?
Nope.
And Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
That's carried.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. And tried to finish at 9, but 13 after will do. And we can blame it on dinner. Night, everyone.